Hey there, and welcome to Weeb Novel Audiobook, your hub for epic fanfics, original stories, and thrilling adventures brought to life. Make sure to subscribe for regular updates and swing by my Patreon for early access and exclusive mature content. Now, sit back and enjoy the journey.
Darren leaned against the kitchen counter, phone pressed to his ear. For a moment, he wondered how Allison had gotten his number. He hoped that she didn't go searching about him and got his number from Lily. But that was impossible, he got a new line some weeks ago. Right. He remembered now. When they had gone on that impromptu ice cream date, they had exchanged numbers. Honestly, he had almost forgotten about it. He had forgotten about mostly everything that happened that day. Except being hit on countless times by college girls. "Hello," he said, his tone neutral. "Hey Darren. How are you?" she asked, her voice light and casual. "It's Allison." "I know," he said. "I have your number saved." He understood that she might have been nervous or insecure about that. Maybe she had thought he didn't care at all to save her number. Darren wasn't that heartless. "I'm good anyway. How are you?" "I'm great, actually. It's nice to hear your voice." Her cheeks reddened on the other side of the call. A man's voice in the morning. The world's greatest aphrodisiac. Darren's voice sounded like a groan. "Thanks. Yeah. So, remember that night drink I told you about? The little get-together with some of our old school friends." Darren took a sip of his coffee, mulling over the memory. Yeah, he did remember her mentioning it briefly, though at the time, he hadn't given it much thought. Did he agree to anything? Fuck. Yeah, he said, threading lightly. "Well, it's happening tomorrow night," she said, her voice lifting with excitement. "Are you still interested?" Darren set his mug down. At least she's still giving me the chance to choose again. He thought about it. A get-together of his former colleagues in school. Ugh. Depends. "Who's gonna be there?" he asked. "Oh, just some of my friends." Darren's brow arched slightly. Some of her friends? His tone remained measured, but his next question carried more weight. "Will Tyler Mooney be there?" There was a noticeable pause. Kara, who had been eavesdropping shamelessly while buttering a piece of toast, perked up. She widened her eyes mockingly at him and mouthed "Ugh" before grinning. Darren looked away. Allison's voice came back, a little too quickly. "No. Of course not. Ever since we broke up, we don't even talk anymore." Darren didn't react immediately, letting a beat of silence pass. Kara leaned closer, making exaggerated faces, mimicking Allison's nervous response. Darren gave her a sidelong glance but ignored her antics. Finally, he exhaled. "Fine. Text me the location. I wouldn't mind catching up with some people." Truthfully, his decision wasn't just about socializing. He was about to start his company, and a gathering of former college mates, especially those from the business and finance department of BUBL, could be useful. Conversations could spark ideas, connections could be made, and valuable insights could surface. Not a bad move. Allison's relief was almost tangible through the phone. "Really? Great. I'll text you the place right away." Kara, still watching him, narrowed her eyes and started mouthing "Who is this?" dramatically, pointing at his phone. Darren ignored her, finishing the call with a simple, "See you then." As soon as he lowered the phone, Kara pounced. "So, who's Alinini's on?" she asked, drumming her fingers on the counter with mock curiosity. "Someone I know," he replied, brushing past her to grab his coffee again. "Or used to." "Someone you know, huh?" Kara smirked. "That didn't sound like someone you know. That sounded like someone I went on a date with but forgot about until she called just now." Darren said nothing. He just took a slow sip of his coffee. Kara leaned in closer, resting her chin on her hand. "So, how would you like a job?" he asked abruptly. Kara blinked. "A job?" He nodded. She narrowed her eyes, staring at him. "You deflect like a pro. I respect that." But she was intrigued. "What is this job you're talking about? In fact, scratch that. What's the pay?" Darren simply smirked and finished his coffee. "Come. We'll talk about it over another round." Kara was unable to do anything as he grabbed her by the arm and led her back to the bedroom. "Jesus, Mr. D. You're gonna run yourself dry." The next night came quicker than Darren expected. The city lights shimmered against the sleek, metallic body of Darren's Aston Martin as he pulled up to the curb. The low growl of the engine purred to a stop, drawing the attention of nearby pedestrians. A group of young men passing by let out whistles of appreciation. "Damn, look at that ride. That's an Aston Martin 1-77, man. That's, like, one of the rarest models out there. Who the hell owns that?" Darren didn't acknowledge them. He stepped out of the car, dressed in a casual yet affluent ensemble, black tailored slacks, an open-collared white button-up, and a sleek, dark gray blazer that complemented his sharp features. On his wrist, a subtle but expensive timepiece gleamed under the city lights. Across the street, two women at a cafe's outdoor seating area turned their heads. One of them subtly nudged the other, whispering something as their eyes followed him. Darren barely glanced their way. Instead of parking right in front of the bar restaurant he was supposed to meet Allison and her friends at, he had chosen to park a fair distance away. Why? Because he wasn't entirely sure who would be there yet. Rolling up in an Aston Martin straight to the entrance was a statement. And he didn't want to come off as a show-off. At least not yet. His shoes tapped against the pavement as he walked toward the venue, the crisp night air carrying the low murmur of city life. The restaurant bar was called the Gilded Stag. He knew about it but he hadn't really been inside before. Didn't have the money for such a fancy place. Experience exclusive tales on my virtual library empire. It was a polished establishment with a modern but slightly rustic touch. Its golden sign of stag horns glowed under the warm exterior lighting, casting a soft hue over the stone entrance. Darren pushed open the light glass door which made a bell sound as he stepped inside. The ambience was lively but not chaotic, the hum of conversation was present, including clinking of glasses and cutlery. Darren scanned the room. Not long after, he spotted her. Allison, sitting in a corner booth, waving at him. Around her, three other women and Darren's gaze landed on the one man sitting with them. His expression barely changed, but something inside him cooled slightly. He recognized him. That was Terry Wilson. A familiar face from college. And not in a good way. Terry had been one of his bullies back in the day. A good friend of Tyler Mooney. Darren's jaw set ever so slightly. Well. This just got interesting. Allison couldn't afford the Gilded Stag. Not on a teacher's salary at least. But with the friends she had gathered with her, getting a table was no problem at all. She had planned this mini get-together for a while. Although many people she invited didn't come, such as Lily, who said she was too busy helping with her dad's company, and Olivia, who said she was too busy building her own. Even Charles Nelson, someone she has also been close friends with, refused to come. And yes, she knew he was shot on the leg a few days ago, but he had declined her way before then. He was a multimillionaire now. It was almost like he didn't have time for her anymore. Not like he used to do back in college. Allison felt alone. Her popularity in college had faded away, and everyone who gushed for her attention back then were way better off than she was. Now, she was the one begging for attention. This get-together. It was the only way she could feel how it was back then. It was her grasping at the edges of the life she once had. Running into Darren Steele was what reopened the wound. Even him. He had gotten better, richer, and she was the one asking for his time. Hopefully, he would be kinder than the rest who had abandoned her. Make her feel seen again. Even though she greatly doubted it. The dim glow of the gilded stag's chandeliers bathed the polished wood and golden accents of the bar in a warm ambience. Laughter and conversation mingled with the rich aroma of wine and expensive cigars. Seated in a private booth toward the back, Allison drummed her fingers lightly on the table, her gaze flicking toward the entrance every so often. Across from her, Terry leaned back, swirling the dark red liquid in his glass with an air of boredom. He let out an exaggerated sigh before speaking. "This wine is not as good as it used to be. Allison, are you sure he's even going to show up?" Sophie McLean, one of the girls at the table, asked. "He's probably just as nervous and misplaced as he was back then. I don't even know why we're waiting for him." "Just wait," Allison said, not looking at her. "He's coming." Terry narrowed his eyes in pointless thought, setting his glass down. "Who are we even waiting for again?" Another of the girls, Emily Darwin, sighed. She had been more interested in catching up with old friends than whatever Allison was planning. "Darren, Terry. Darren Steele. The crypto geek. And Allie, I don't get why you're making such a big deal out of him anyway. He was probably one of the least liked students back in college." Allison exhaled through her nose. I know. Her fingers brushed against the stem of her untouched wine glass. I want you guys to see him." From her right, Tamara Johnstone smirked, tilting her head. "You're not teasing him, are you?" she asked, her voice playful but edged with suspicion. Allison's lips parted slightly, as if caught off guard. "What? No." Tamara's smirk widened. "Really? You didn't lie to him, did you? Tell me you didn't say this was a date just to mess with his feelings like you did back then." Sophie giggled, covering her mouth. Terry chuckled lowly. "Yeah. That's some kind of shit Allison would do, isn't it?" "Oh, come on," Allison groaned, shaking her head. "It's nothing like that. I just want you guys to see him. Ugh. I've changed, okay? I'm not like how I was in high school and college." Terry raised an eyebrow but said nothing. "Okay, whatever." He rested his head on his palm and lay backwards. Then the door opened. Terry's eyes flicked open lazily, glancing at the entrance. But his expression shifted when he saw who walked in. An extremely good-looking young man stepped inside, dressed in fine casual yet elegant clothes. His wristwatch caught the warm glow of the chandeliers, subtle yet unmistakably expensive. His brown hair was styled just enough to look effortlessly refined, and the sharp lines of his face carried a quiet confidence that drew eyes as he moved. Terry squinted. "Who the hell is that?" The other girls turned to look, their casual interest quickly shifting to something closer to shock. Then, they saw Allison waving to the man. "Wah, what is she doing?" "What are you doing, Allison?" Tamara called. "Allison, put your hand down," Emily whispered harshly. "Why are you waving at that handsome guy? He's going to think we're crazy." But Allison didn't listen to them. A slow grin spread across her face as she lifted her hand higher, her fingers moving in a small wave. Across the room, Darren hesitated briefly when he saw her, but then he began making his way toward them. Sophie inhaled sharply. "Oh my God. He's coming here. He's coming." The girls straightened in their seats, subtly adjusting their hair, their postures, their expressions. Terry, on the other hand, sat up, his jaw tightening. Darren approached the booth, his step slow and precise. When he stopped in front of them, he looked at Allison first. "Hey." Allison smiled. "Hey." Her eyes flickered over him, taking in his attire, his face, his presence. She blushed. Terry, still processing what was happening, glanced between them before asking, Allison, do you know this guy? Allison giggled, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. What are you talking about? That's Darren. Silence. Then it. The reaction was immediate. The girl's jaws dropped. Terry's brows shot up. Sophie, Tamara, and Emily exchanged stunned looks. Darren was sat now at the table, and so far, they'd only ordered some snacks and wine. Darren had gotten a response from the system as it ushered out all their profiles and separate business. Except Allison and Emily, who were both art-inclined. System scan, business profiles profile, Sophie McLean business name, Verite magazine industry, luxury fashion and lifestyle media position, founder and editor-in-chief established, 4 years ago revenue, moderate, rapidly growing reputation, B+ profile, Tamara Johnstone business name, Horizon Strategies and Investments industry, finance and business consulting position, CEO and lead investment strategist established, 6 years ago revenue, high, strong. Market presence reputation, A- profile, Terry Wilson business name, Wilson Logistics and Supplies, subsidiary of Moon Enterprises, industry, general contracting and supply chain management position, operations supervisor established, 3 years ago revenue, stable but unremarkable reputation, C- Darren narrowed his eyes at the information. Of course. I'm not surprised. All Terry did in college was attach himself to Tyler Mooney. Obviously he went to him and got a job as a contractor. Experience tales at my virtual library empire, but of course, this was good news still. Because Terry Wilson was a path straight to Moon Enterprises and Tyler Mooney himself. Because of his presence, the atmosphere in the bar had shifted greatly. Neither of them had expected to see Darren appearing in such a manner. At this point, they could recognize him, but comparing him to how he looked back in college, the difference was mind-shattering. Conversation became short and careful. What had started as an idle gathering of old acquaintances had become something else entirely, a silent evaluation. Everyone at the table was looking at him differently now. Some with surprise, some with curiosity, and one with growing resentment. After they had all ordered, Sophie, still looking at him as if seeing a ghost, was the first to ask him a direct question. "Excuse me," she began. Darren lifted his head. Are you, really Darren Steele?" she asked gently. Darren gave her a short smile. "You mean Death Wish Darren?" Sophie's eyes flickered with surprise. "Yes," Darren said simply. "It's me." He wasn't being hostile by pointing out the name, he was just letting her know that he still remembered that she, just like the other girls here, used to call her that name. Sitting beside Allison, he returned his expression to an unreadable one. Sophie McLean tucked a strand of blonde hair behind her ear and gave Emily a glance. Emily in turn, shot one at Tamara. "So it really is you, huh?" Sophie started, a knowing smile playing on her lips. "How long has it been?" "College. Almost 2 years now." Darren nodded, his fingers lazily tracing the rim of his own untouched drink. "Something like that. You did graduate before some of us." "Those were fun times," Tamara Johnstone chimed in, crossing her legs elegantly. Darren noticed the sleek black outfit that she was dressed in. One that screamed wealth and calculated ambition. "Some of us have moved on to different things. Some of us are still finding our way." Darren smirked slightly at her subtle dig but let it pass. "And what about you, Sophie? How's the magazine doing?" Sophie's face lit up with genuine enthusiasm, then she narrowed her eyes. You know about that?" she asked, surprised. Darren nodded. "How can I forget? You used to carry that beat-up leather notebook everywhere, sketching out logo ideas, listing headlines you wanted to write. You even interviewed students in the cafeteria like it was some New York Times piece. You never shut up about how you were going to build your own empire. It's good that you're doing something you've had lots of passion for. Sophie blushed and lowered her face. Hee hee. A nervous chuckle left her. I never knew you noticed. I did. He took a sip of his wine. Verite, right. Yes, she lit up. Verite is finally gaining real traction. We've been featured in some major luxury campaigns, and I've got a few high-profile names lined up. It's a grind, but like you said, I've been doing this since high school. I wasn't going to let it go. Tamara swirled the dark liquid in her glass, watching their exchange. She didn't know why, but she quickly became jealous of the attention Darren was giving Sophie, and so she chimed in. I've been busy too, she said. My firm, Horizon Strategies, is in the process of a transition. My father is stepping down, and I'm next in line to take over, except my brother thinks otherwise. Sophie made a face. Emily turned to her. Oh God, you mean Andrew? I thought he didn't want anything to do with business. Tamara exhaled through her nose. That was before he realized how much money was on the table. Darren leaned back slightly. So it's a competition then? Tamara's lips curled into a smirk, looking at him. Everything is a competition. Darren hummed, understanding that logic all too well. Agreed. Sophie suddenly perked up. Speaking of work, I'm in the middle of trying to secure Ava Monroe as our next cover sponsor. Darren raised a brow. Ava Monroe. Yeah, the actress. It's a big deal for us. If we get her, Verite goes from promising to established overnight. He lowered his head in thought. What a small world. Ava Monroe is basically my neighbor. Sophie, my colleague from school, wants her signature to take her company to the next level. Do I have some sort of leverage here? Is there something I could even want from her? He thought harder. Could a magazine company gain me anything as a business ally? The system began giving him responses, but Darren selected read later once he noticed that Tamara was leaning in to ask him a question. So, Darren, what do you do exactly? Darren glanced shortly at Allison, who smiled beautifully, knowing what he was going to say. Business, he replied. I do business. That answer was far from satisfactory. Both Sophie and Tamara exchanged glances before pressing on. I mean, so do most of us, Tamara giggled. What kind of business? Emily piped in. Feeling as though the art and crafts girl shouldn't put her mouth in discussions such as this, Darren held back his thoughts and replied casually. It's a new business. I'm just starting it up. The table went silent for a moment. Then, from the other end, a slow, mocking chuckle rose. Oh, give me a fucking break, Terry Wilson scoffed, shaking his head as he set his drink down with a loud clink. This is such bullshit. Darren turned his gaze towards him, eyes cool but unreadable. Something on your mind, Terry? Terry sneered, leaning forward on the table. Yeah, I got something on my mind, Steele. You walk in here, dressed like a goddamn Wall Street poster boy, acting like you're some big shot, and now you're telling us you're a businessman? What business, huh? Don't tell me, let me guess. You burned all your savings on designer clothes and expensive cologne just so you could put on this little show. Allison tensed beside Darren. Terry, no, I want to hear this, Terry continued, his voice dripping with condescension. What the hell could you possibly be running? Last I checked, you were hanging on Lily Smithers' clit just so you could get a job under her father. And you've been sucking Tyler Mooney's cock ever since high school just to feed on his crumbs. Terry's eyes turned red. Allison gagged. The other girls had wide eyes of shock. Silence reigned for a while. Uncomfortable silence, leaving Terry slightly disgraced. He chuckled. Yeah, I remember now. That's why we called you Death Wish Darren, wasn't it? Always running your mouth no matter how much beating you get. Ah. You remember? How nice. Darren appeared not to even acknowledge him. Terry grinned. Oh, I do. I remember a lot of things. Like how you lived in that shithole on Malgarine Street. You still there? A chuckle rose from one of the girls, though she quickly covered her mouth. Sophie and Tamara didn't laugh, but they watched Darren closely, waiting to see how he'd respond. Read new chapters at my virtual library Empire. Darren exhaled slowly through his nose, setting his drink down. He turned fully toward Terry, leveling him with a look so calm it was almost unsettling. Actually, I don't. I bought a house. Terry's grin twitched slightly. Oh yeah? And I'm the King of England. The table laughed, but Darren didn't. But you wouldn't make a very great king, would you, Terry? Darren said. What? Terry narrowed his eyes. You have no idea how to be one. You're more used to being the courier, the servant. That's all you've been great at? Darren continued, eyes still locked on him. What do you do these days? Terry rolled his shoulders. I work in logistics. Darren nodded, feigning interest. Oh? Your own company? Terry scoffed. Nah, I work under Moon Enterprises. They own the business. But I handle operations, which means I actually do real work, unlike whatever fantasy you're living in. Darren smirked slightly. So you work for a subsidiary? Terry's face twitched. Yeah, so. Darren leaned in slightly, voice quiet but sharp. Terry, don't be a fool. My company may be new, but the difference between us is that I own mine. His eyes narrowed with fire. You don't own anything. You work. You're the slave. And your livelihood depends on the real owners of the company. Tyler. He took a sip of his wine, then adjusted. So make sure to use more spit as you do it. And no teeth. Silence. The girls all clasped their mouths with their palms, some of them hid their faces. Terry's face darkened, and the tension at the table spiked. Darren could hear Allison softly exhaling beside him, while Tamara's lips curled slightly in what could only be amusement. Another round of laughter came from Terry, forced and bitter. Oh, you think you're hot shit now? Terry muttered, swirling his drink. Darren didn't say anything. Another silence stretched over the table. Then, with another slow, deliberate sip of his drink, Darren turned to Sophie McLean. Sophie. I want to make you an offer. Her brow raised. Laughter burst from the table, some of it light-hearted, some of it sharp-edged. Darren sat back, watching as the amusement played out around him. Sophie raised a perfectly shaped brow, swirling her wine glass between her fingers. So let me get this straight, she said, a slow smirk forming. You're saying that if you get Ava Monroe to sign, my company will owe you. Darren leaned forward slightly, his fingers tapping against the table. That's the deal, he said simply. The laughter came again, louder this time. Tamara, who had been more composed, let out a small chuckle. Darren, Ava Monroe is the biggest name in the city right now. Getting her to sign anything requires connections, power, and a whole lot of money. No offense, but I'm not exactly sure where you stand on that spectrum. Terry scoffed, shaking his head in exaggerated disbelief. This is priceless, he said, throwing a hand in the air. Look what I was saying. This guy is clearly living in La La Land. Allison didn't say anything. She just stared at Darren beside her. Everything he's told me so far has been authentic. Darren. Does he really know Ava Monroe? I mean, she's as big as there is. How can he get her to sign with Sophie's company? Listen, Death wish Darren, you're really laying it on thick tonight, aren't you? First, you waltz in here looking like you stepped out of a billionaire's closet, now you're making deals like you're some big-time player. Darren said nothing. Terry continued, unable to let it go. Man, you must have saved up every last dime for this little stunt. What's the next trick? You gonna tell us you've got dinner with the mayor next week? He threw his head back and laughed, the sound obnoxious and sharp. Sophie, however, watched Darren more closely. What if he's being serious right now? What if? All right, she said suddenly, leaning forward with a smirk. I'll entertain this. If you actually pull it off, if you bring Ava Monroe in as my front cover sponsor, then yes, my company will owe you. Tamara turned to her, surprised. You're serious? Sophie shrugged. What's the harm? It's not like it'll happen, right? And if it does, that's a big win for me. Terry wiped at his eyes, still shaking with laughter. Oh, this is gold, he said. Then, suddenly, his expression shifted. You know what? Since Darren's feeling so generous tonight, let's make sure he gets to play the part properly. Darren looked at him without expression. Terry grinned wide and gestured toward the bar. Hey, everyone. Eat and drink to your heart's content. My good pal Darren Steele is covering the bill tonight. A cheer rang out as waiters moved to take more orders. Sophie, Emily, Tamara exchanged looks, and even Allison tensed slightly. Thank you, Darren. Darren. You're the man. You rock, Mr. Steele. Darren didn't flinch, merely watching as the wine kept flowing. Allison looked at him. Hey, are you okay? She whispered, placing her hand on his arm. Darren looked down at her. Yes, he replied. Nothing I can't handle. Terry noticed this moment with narrowed eyes. Eventually, the girls began to rise from their seats, stretching and adjusting their coats. They thanked Allison for inviting them, sharing hugs and goodbyes. Well, Darren, Sophie said with a playful smile, pulling out her phone. You better give me your number. If we're going to become business partners, communication is important. Tamara chuckled, following suit. I just want to keep in touch. Even Emily brought out her phone. Same here. Darren glanced at all of them. Pretentious. Women were so pretentious. However, he agreed and they exchanged numbers. As they left, Sophie winked. Thanks for dinner, mystery man. Darren barely reacted, just a handsome eyebrow raise. Terry, meanwhile, rose to his feet and turned to Allison, his grin dropping into sternness. Meet me outside. Allison stiffened, hesitating. Terry now, he said, voice cold. Don't waste my time. A long pause. She and Darren exchanged a look and then she swallowed and nodded, rising from her seat and following him out. Darren sat still, waiting as the check arrived. The number was high, double digits in the thousands, but he paid it without a word. Then, with a slow breath, he stepped out of the bar, while the female bartender stared at him in awe. Hey. You're the man, Darren. Another customer said as Darren walked out. Darren glanced at him for a moment, and the man gave him a casual salute. Outside, he found Allison leaning against the wall, arms folded, her head lowered. She looked up as he approached, her gaze weary and sad. So, you actually paid it off, she murmured. You really are rich, huh? Darren stopped beside her, studying her face. She let out a shaky breath. Everyone is. Everyone except me. She lowered her head again, fingers gripping her coat. Darren took a step closer. What's your business with Terry? His voice was gentle. Was he the reason you invited me out here? Allison hesitated. Then, after a long pause, she lifted her gaze to his, eyes shining with unshed tears. I think I need help, Darren. He waited. She swallowed, then finally confessed. My life is a mess. And Terry said he'd help me if I did some things for him. And she swallowed again. I did. So he took money from Moon Enterprises. A lot of money. For me. Darren's expression darkened. Terry stole from his boss. Allison's voice dropped to almost a whisper. He told me it was a fund for one of their private research projects. $200,000. But he told me they wouldn't be needing it for at least 2 years. So he redirected it. Used his access to reroute the funds and gave it to me. Darren's jaw clenched. 200 grand. That was not pocket change. Not something the Moonies would overlook. Terry wants the money back because he said they've started sniffing around. Allison wiped her hands over her face. If they find out, Tyler and his father will eat him alive. And Terry, he's terrified of losing his position under them. He told me if this ever gets out, if they come after him, he's going to make me suffer for it. Darren grimaced. So even now, Terry's still afraid of the Moonies. Fucking bottom feeder. Allison swallowed hard. I just needed someone else here. Someone other than Terry. Just in case things got bad. She let out a shaking breath. My life. NGH. My life is just a complete mess. I'm worthless. I'm nothing. I'm not making a difference like you guys. I don't know what I'm doing sometimes. Why I even bother waking up. Darren's gaze didn't waver. She hesitated. Then, she looked up at him, her eyes wet with tears. I know how I treated you in college, she whispered. I was awful. I was a snob. I wasted my time on guys like Tyler and Jackson. And now. Her hands curled into fists at her sides. Now I have no one. Her voice broke. Not one person from back then even cares about me. But when I ran into you a few days ago. Her lip trembled. It felt like I was looking at hope. Like I'd seen hope face to face. She wiped at her eyes, sniffling. I haven't stopped thinking about you since then, she admitted softly. Darren didn't move. She lowered her gaze once again. I know I don't deserve much from you. I don't deserve anything at all, and I wouldn't ask you to go out of your way to help me. But. A shaky breath. Take me with you. His brows furrowed slightly. To where? She swallowed. The college reunion is at the end of this month, she clarified. I cannot face our classmates as the disgrace I am now. Please, Darren. All I want, is for you to take me with you. Stay tuned for updates on my virtual library empire. Darren said nothing. He merely looked down at her, silent eyes unreadable. And Allison waited. Trust not a woman when she weeps, for it is in her nature to weep when she wants her will. Darren had Socrates to thank for teaching him that. He hoped he hadn't been too harsh on Allison. He pitied her plight, really. But in the end, he felt she was undeniably using him. So he told her no. And he told her that holding on to the glories of her past isn't going to make her feel any better. Gaining pleasure from nostalgia only makes one a ghost. Living in the present was what made us human. Allison had to face what her life was today, especially if she had any plans of it getting better. If she did this and became proud of who she was now, then she could call him, and they could talk. Darren sighed, taking a sip of his wine. Who knew? Maybe I have some Socrates in me too. And perhaps it sounds ironic coming from someone who's literally reliving his past. But the difference is, my past is now my present. He exhaled. Either way, telling her no was probably for the best. I'm not fond of the idea of being leeched on. Allison wants me to walk into the reunion with her so she wouldn't look alone, And now that I'm, well, a millionaire, that's also some status for her as well. He collapsed on his couch and picked up the remote. Not happening. The TV screen flickered on and music blasted into the air of his living room. It's been a volatile month in the financial sector as Bitcoin once again proves why it remains the Wild West of investments. But this time, the chaos isn't from a crash. Today we have finally decided to bring light on the mystery investor that has all crypto enthusiasts talking. Darren raised a brow. MMM. The camera panned to Brooklyn Baker, the poised and professional anchor of Business Everyday. She wore a tailored navy blue suit, her expression tight as she continued. This chick again. Darren narrowed his eyes. Indeed, ladies and gentlemen, it has been a requested topic by many and we've finally decided to give him the publicity he's so clearly after. The individual operating under the absurd alias Fugly Duckling has broken records with aggressive Bitcoin purchases, triggering fluctuations in the market. This so-called investor has pulled vast amounts of BTC in a recent exchange, causing speculation and paranoia. She sighed, clearly unimpressed. Experts are calling it reckless. Some believe this is the work of a new player trying to manipulate the market, while others claim it's simply another fool who will learn the hard way why cryptocurrency is an unstable joke. Brooklyn's lips pursed before delivering the final dig. Whoever they are, one thing is clear: Fugly Duckling is either a financial genius, or an absolute idiot. Just last week, the minor fall and then rise, and then fall again just proves the madness of this currency. It entails a Jejum Quesenke, Jjavshi all. Her voice faded off. The TV cast a dim glow on a new location, a sleek, modern office. A smoky voice sighed. Will you look at that? They think he's after publicity. Those fools can't see that if that was the case then he wouldn't keep his identity hidden. The office settled into silence, save for the rhythmic tapping of fingers against a keyboard. Ryan Anders leaned back in his leather chair, fingers steepled, eyes narrowing at the man sitting across from him. Rico Evans. The hacker they had caught trying to breach their own systems. A man with quick hands and a quicker mouth. Since he was destined to go to jail because of it, his freedom depended entirely on one thing. Finding Fugly Duckling. Anders exhaled slowly. I hope I don't need to remind you what happens if you fail. Rico didn't look up from his laptop, but the smirk on his face faltered. Yeah, he muttered. I get thrown into a nice, cold cell and get to play chess with a bunch of guys who don't like hackers. Anders didn't smile. More like you disappear, and no one asks questions. The tension thickened. Amelia, Anders' secretary, stood near the desk, her arms crossed. She was watching Rico carefully, her sharp blue eyes unreadable. Rico sighed, rubbing his temple. Look, I don't want to go to jail. Who wants to? So I'm going to do everything possible. But I ain't Jesus, I can't do miracles. If I'm not able to track it, there's nothing I can do. Stay connected through my virtual library empire and I promise, it ain't as easy as you think. Whoever this Fugly Duckling is, they're smart, real smart. Not only have they kept their wallet and personal details completely separate, but the firewalls they've set up is like a diamond wall. It's almost like someone had attempted to hack into it before and it was multi-secured after. Whoever that was, by the way, fuck you. You've only gone and made my work harder. But the point is, that guy's not a duckling. He's a ghost. Anders' fingers drummed against the desk. He glanced at Amelia, then back at him. Then why am I still keeping you around, Rico? Rico raised a hand in surrender. I said it's difficult, not impossible. He turned the laptop around, displaying a series of numbers and data streams. See this? I traced the most recent heavy Bitcoin transaction. The 1.5 million? It came from here. A beat. Anders leaned forward. Amelia did the same, glancing at the screen. The location flashed. Male Green Street. Silence. That can't be right. Amelia frowned. Malagreen's just a working-class neighborhood. No one living there could afford to make moves like this. Anders studied the address, his mind racing. Unless they don't want to be found. He smiled deeply. I'm in love with you, dear duckling sir. You are one cunning man. One who hides his identity online and hides it as well in the real world. The idea made sense. A person secretive online could be just as secretive in real life. But who? Anders turned to Amelia. I want everything on Male Green Street. Property owners, renters, anyone who could be operating from there. Find out who the hell we're dealing with. She nodded, already pulling out her phone. Meanwhile, Rico sat still, staring at the screen. His fingers twitched. A memory surfaced. Male Green Street. He did know someone from Male Green. Not just anyone. Someone who had been obsessed with crypto back in college. Always talking about blockchain this, decentralization that. Always saying if he had the money, he'd take over the market. But back then, he didn't have a cent to his name. Anders turned back to Rico. Get me a name, Evans. Rico forced a grin. Working on it, boss. But as soon as he left the office, he pulled out his phone. It rang twice before the line clicked. A voice, smooth and familiar. Rico. A pause. Then, amusement. Hey man, it's been a long time, man. Rico exhaled, gripping the phone tighter. Yeah, Darren, it has. Darren leaned against the kitchen counter, phone pressed to his ear as he listened to Rico's familiar voice. How you been, man? Rico asked. I'm good. Still breathing, Darren replied. Honestly man, it's been forever. You're calling my old cell right now. I've changed it to a new one, I'll send it to you later. Alright. Hey, is that really you? Your voice sounds kinda deeper. Darren chuckled. I guess it's been that long, huh? You know, I actually swung by looking for you once at Dataforge, but you weren't there. Rico paused. Dataforge? Why would you go looking for me there? I mean, I know the place. Shit. Darren face-palmed. Right. He got the timeline wrong again. Rico hadn't started working at Dataforge yet. He needed to be more careful about these slips. They continued catching up, exchanging small talk about life and old times. Then Rico shifted gears. You still living on Male Green Street? Darren hesitated, thinking it over. Yeah. I do. Rico seemed to mull something over. Then he said, okay. Maybe I'll pay you a visit sometime. See you and your mom. Darren nodded to himself. That's fine. Just make sure to call first. A beat of silence. Heck, he sounds masculine and stern as hell. I know that's a weird thing to say, but this doesn't sound like the Darren I know at all. Oh well. Then Rico snorted. As you demand, champ. See you around. Yeah. You too. The call ended. Darren lowered his phone and stared at it for a moment. Something about that call was strange. It was pretty off-putting for Rico to call him out of nowhere like that, just to catch up. One could say that maybe Rico was in a tight spot and needed some cash. But Rico wasn't dumb, would know that Darren wouldn't be any much better than him when it comes to cash. So what was he up to? Did he know Darren was rich now? He clicked his tongue. TCH always like hackers to be nosy. Speaking of hackers. He looked around. Where is Kara? She still hasn't returned from the errand I sent her on. Shaking off the thought, Darren walked to the fridge and grabbed a tasty snack. He ripped the wrapper open with his fingers, took a bite, and settled onto the couch. I was hoping to watch business every day to see if they had something informative about what's going on in the business world, but all they ever talk about is Bitcoin, and now me. Geez, their grudge with cryptocurrency isn't going to do anything. Nothing is stopping Bitcoin's rise. He made himself comfortable. And mine alongside it? System, preview the information on how to set up my crypto investment company. Let me go through it and study more. Once Kara gets back, we'll have to begin in earnest. I think we should start the month strong with a successful first week. A moment later, a sleek purple interface materialized in front of him. System initialization, building a crypto investment company objective. Establish a structured and legally sound crypto investment firm leveraging pre-knowledge of Bitcoin's price trends. Darren had come up with this business idea last month after his second Bitcoin purchase and after the system had explained financial paradox and other activities that he could use to his favor because of the regression. He planned to create an investment company which would have subsidiaries for crypto, real estate, and solid investments. But he was to begin with crypto first, since it was where he had leverage. If he built it properly, he could then explore into the other subsidiaries. The system continued the explanation. Phase 1, Foundation and Planning Entity Type, register as a limited liability company, LLC, or corporation for legal protection. Jurisdiction, choose a crypto-friendly country or capitalize on present country where crypto is unpopular and become a pioneer. Use crypto-friendly countries for branches. Company name, select a trustworthy, imposing or catching brand. Legal compliance, obtain necessary investment and money transmitter licenses. Ensure adherence to AML, anti-money laundering, and KYC, know your customer, regulations. Hire a specialized legal team to draft contracts and protect company assets. Business model, charge a 2% management fee and 20% performance fee from investors. Target high net worth individuals, family offices, and institutional investors. Phase 2, technical infrastructure. Crypto wallets, secure tracking accounts through Ledger/Trezor. Trading platform, utilize Binance, Kraken, or Coinbase Pro for high volume transactions. Software development, build a proprietary trading algorithm and real-time monitoring dashboard. Security measures, implement multi-signature wallets and hire cybersecurity experts to prevent breaches. That made Darren smirk. This was going to be airtight. Read exclusive adventures at my virtual library. Empire. Phase 3, hiring and team building. CTO, CFO, legal counsel, and marketing director to handle operations. Traders, cybersecurity specialists, and investor relations managers for expansion. Enforce strict NDAs to protect proprietary knowledge. Darren had been thinking a lot about this part. Who to employ? He had some names in mind, but he would have to offer them catching incentives to bring them in from their present employers. Phase 4, fundraising and investor relations. Use personal funds to kickstart operations. Develop a pitch deck showcasing pre-regression Bitcoin market insights. Ensure investors pass KYC verification before onboarding. Phase 5, execution and automation. Deploy automated trading bots for precise entry/exit points. Maintain multiple tracking accounts to diversify risk. Provide monthly reports to keep investors engaged. Phase 6, scaling and expansion. Launch a professional website and establish an online presence. Introduce Ethereum and altcoin investment products. Expand to global offices in key crypto hubs. Phase 7, risk management. Prepare contingency plans for market crashes or hacks. Maintain emergency funds for operational stability. Diversify into stocks and real estate when crypto volatility spikes. Darren placed a finger on his jaw. Most of these are very easy to grasp, but what I'm most interested in is for this company to be successful. And I mean staggeringly successful. System. He thought for a moment. Can you show me some success indicators that I can check to know that my company is on the right path? Ding. The investor system responded, success indicators, Heavy checkmark. Consistent profitability. Heavy checkmark. Growing investor base. Heavy checkmark. Recognized authority in the crypto community. Thanks. Just as Darren leaned forward, ready to deep dive into the financial structuring, a knock echoed at his door. He frowned. Who the hell would come unannounced? Standing up, he walked over and pulled it open. His eyes instantly widened at the person, standing there, staring back at him. It was the news reporter chick. Brooklyn Baker. To be honest, Darren wasn't sure what he expected when he opened the door, but in over 1,000 trials, he would have never guessed that it was the business everyday reporter, Brooklyn Baker. She stood on his doorstep, wearing a blue shirt with black plain office trousers. Her face was shot straight at his. She was staring at him, and with a serious but uncertain gaze, like she was trying to make out his features. Her sharp brown eyes darted between his face and a photograph in her hand. She checked again, and again. Darren Steele, she asked, like she wasn't entirely sure. Darren raised an eyebrow but said nothing. She squinted at the photo again, then back at him. Yes, it is you, she confirmed, sizing him up with a subtle tilt of her head. Taller than I expected. Darren leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. You're the reporter chick. The words itself was supposed to come with a mannerism of surprise. But Darren had just said it like he was reading a sentence. Brooklyn's lips twitched at his dismissive tone. Straightening her posture, she responded formally, Brooklyn Baker. I'm the head reporter for Business Everyday. Darren didn't shift an inch as he studied her. She looked prettier in real life compared to the TV. Her blonde hair framed the sharp, inquisitive features of her face, and her brown eyes held a glint of relentless curiosity, scanning him as if she were already writing his story in her head. Good for you, he replied. Her confidence didn't waver. May I come in? No, Darren said flatly. You can stay just where you are, first of all. That threw her off, if only for a moment. She blinked, her confidence momentarily stuttering at his firm refusal. Darren's eyes flicked past her, noting the white press van parked across his front yard, the Business Everyday logo plastered on the side. His jaw tightened. You know, I just saw you on the news, he said. Does that mean you're not being broadcast live? Brooklyn glanced over her shoulder at the van and then back at him, unconcerned. Things like that are done all the time, she said smoothly. I had a story to follow. A story? Darren's mind ran 100 miles an hour. Was she already onto him? How? So fast? Did she know he was fugly duckling? He exhaled through his nose and deflected, tilting his head. So you just admitted that news companies record broadcasts, then act like it's live. That's something serious to be telling a random person like me. Brooklyn smirked. My broadcast team knows how to improvise to suit me. She folded her arms, exuding the smug arrogance of someone at the peak of their career. I'm chasing a very big story, and somehow, in it, your name popped up. Darren narrowed his eyes. My name. It's sounding more and more like she's figured it out. But I have to be careful. Don't say anything until she tells you exactly what it is. He kept his expression inaccessible. I don't talk to the press, he replied. And how did you find me, anyway? Brooklyn lifted her chin and shrugged proudly. I'm good at my job. That's not a good enough answer. Darren narrowed his eyes. How do you expect me to be content with that? What do you think this is? A movie. He moved to close his door. Now get out of my house, stalker. Brooklyn's confidence cracked. Did you just call me a stalker? Darren began closing the door. No way. I am not a stalker. She stammered, her usual arrogance slipping into something defensive and insecure. I'm just good at investigating and tracking. Darren gave her a bland stare. So are stalkers. Brooklyn's eyes twitched. AHH. NGH. She clenched her fists. Stop calling me a stalker. And stop closing your door in my face. She put a hand against it, holding it open. Just give me a moment of your time. No, Darren refused once more. Leave me alone. I'm not interested in your antics. The door began to shut. It's about your former boss. Brooklyn lifted her voice sharply. Gareth Smithers. Darren's fingers stilled on the door frame. Checkmate. He'd just gotten her to spill out the reason she was here. Slowly, he pulled the door open again. Brooklyn straightened her blouse, regaining her composure. He's involved in a major scandal that's become the talk of the business world. During my investigation, everyone I've spoken to said the same thing. It started with you. You were the first to successfully break out of his company unharmed early last month. Appearing to be calm, Darren looked down at her and asked. So what do you want? She sighed hopefully. I just want an interview from the guy who defied Gareth Smithers. A beat of silence passed. Darren studied her for a while longer, then stepped aside and walked into the living room, leaving the door open. Brooklyn smirked in victory and gestured to her cameraman by the van, telling him to come on. When she stepped inside, she saw Darren pouring himself a glass of wine. Camera guy stays outside, he said. Brooklyn turned back and made a slicing neck gesture toward her crew. Aboard. He scurried back to the van. Now inside, she took a slow look around the place, her heels clicking softly against the hardwood. The decor, the polished furniture, the loud elegance, it wasn't what she expected. This is a nice place, she admitted. Thank you, Darren said, sinking into his couch. You can take a seat. She sat on the opposite couch, still taking in the surroundings. Maybe too nice of a place, she mused, her tone shifting. Considering what I was told about you. They shared a gaze lock. Darren said nothing. Brooklyn's lips perked up. Do you own it? He took his time answering. My mother does. He lifted his glass and took a slow sip of wine. Smirking to herself, she studied him. Then, with a soft exhale, she said, You didn't even ask if I wanted a drink. Darren's gaze was indifferent. You didn't think you'd be parched when you drove all the way here. She pouted. Not very gentlemanly of you. Darren's facial expression didn't change. You weasel into a private street, demand your way into my home, and speak to me with condescension. He leaned back, swirling the wine in his glass. You're not being very ladylike yourself. Brooklyn smirked, though there was a flicker of irritation beneath it. Darren looked away from her nonchalantly. Why should I be a gentleman to a woman who isn't a lady? Brooklyn leaned back slightly, crossing one leg over the other as she studied Darren with sharp, calculating eyes. She was a reporter. She'd spoken to many people, so it was easy not to take offense to some things, but that one stung. I do what I do for my job. There's basically no risk I wouldn't take for a good story. Darren exhaled through his nose. And that's exactly the problem with you journalists. Brooklyn tilted her head. You don't like journalists. It's not that I don't like you, he said, his voice flat. I just know exactly what your kind does. Nothing you won't do for a good story. That also includes lying and manipulating. For you people, truth means nothing when a headline is at stake. Brooklyn smirked. You wound me. Darren said nothing, waiting for her to get to the point. But she wasn't done poking around just yet. Her gaze flicked around the room before settling back on him. However, I am fairly confused, Darren Steele. This house. The car outside. This street. You live on Male Green Street. So I heard. You graduated from Brookfield University of Business and Literature. You took an intern-paying job under Gareth Smithers. I even heard you were dating his daughter, Lily Smithers. She leaned forward slightly. But you broke up. The same day you left his company. Darren's jaw tightened, but he kept his face neutral. Brooklyn arched a brow. How does someone like you end up here in just a month? Were you a secret millionaire in disguise? Like in those Bollywood movie shorts? Darren didn't speak for a while, then he kissed his teeth. When did this become about me? I thought you were here to ask questions about Gareth Smithers. Brooklyn smiled, lowering her head for a moment before looking up again. You're right. Sorry about that. My curiosity got the best of me. She met his gaze directly. That's another thing you hate about us, isn't it? We can't control our curiosity. Darren said nothing. Brooklyn took that as her cue to move forward. Her expression became more professional, more serious. Before we begin, she said, reaching into her bag and pulling out a small recorder, I just need to let you know that this discussion is now being recorded. Darren glanced at the device, then gave a slight nod. That's fine. She clicked it on, placing it on the table between them. Then, she folded her hands together. If you don't mind, this is major news that still hasn't fully come out yet. I ask that you keep it between us if you can. Then she began. An employee of Gareth Smithers whom I won't disclose came to me and made a report. Then, more reports started coming in. Numerous accounts of Gareth Smithers, exposing his tactics of capturing young talents straight out of university and locking them down with ironclad, borderline slave contracts. She paused, gauging Darren's reaction. And more than that, stealing their business ideas to grow his company. Darren sat still, his fingers loosely interlocked. But inside, his mind raced. A source she wouldn't disclose. Could it be Sandy? In the former timeline, it was because of her that Smithers had entered a scandal. But this time, that wasn't supposed to happen because she resigned earlier. However, Darren was the one that made that possible. He was the one who altered Gareth's employment contract, making it easy for the employees to resign when they wished. Did that singular act cause a butterfly effect? Had his attempt to free himself simply opened the floodgates for everyone else to walk out and report the truth? He exhaled slowly. It didn't matter. A bloated, self-centered man like Gareth Smithers was bound to fall into scandal eventually. It was his nature. Brooklyn continued, her voice lower now. I haven't disclosed this part to anyone else yet. But. She hesitated, watching his expression carefully. There have also been reports of sexual harassment. Darren's brows lifted slightly. Sexual harassment. His thoughts circled back to Sandy. That was exactly what she had accused Gareth of in the former timeline. But now she was no longer there. Could there be someone else in the office that Gareth would have harassed? Brooklyn watched him. Everyone I've interviewed says it started with you, she said. So how were you able to break free? How did you alter the contract that bound the employees so wickedly? And why did you do it? Only a short hesitation before Darren responded firmly, look. I only did it because I realized I was being used. He exhaled, eyes momentarily distant. One day, the next 10 years of my life flashed before my eyes. In those 10 years, I was shackled to Gareth Smithers. No growth. No freedom. No future. He met her gaze. So I cut him loose immediately. And I did it without hesitation. Brooklyn's pen scratched against her notepad as she wrote quickly. Darren continued. To be honest, I wasn't thinking much about others when I changed the employment contract. I didn't even know it would extend to them as well. And I definitely didn't know it would cause such a scandal. Brooklyn glanced up, intrigued. Darren watched her, taking note of how diligent she was. He realized that she really took her job seriously. But that still doesn't tell me how you managed to change the contract, she pressed. Darren thought back to the lawyer. The bribe. The information on a surefire investment that would rake in $7 million. Of course, he couldn't tell her that. His lips pressed thinly. I can't tell you that. Brooklyn narrowed her eyes slightly. But you are certain that Gareth Smithers has been stealing his employees' ideas? Yes, Darren answered without hesitation. Can you tell me how? Darren leaned forward slightly. Smithers would bring in employees, fresh graduates with ambition, just like me. He'd make them feel special. Then, he'd have them present business ideas, investment strategies, market predictions. Everything. His voice was calm, but there was an edge beneath it. And once they'd done all the work, he'd take their ideas, tweak them just enough to claim ownership, and turn them into profit. Meanwhile, the employees got nothing. No credit. No royalties. Even a pat on the back would have been nice. He makes it seem like it was what they're hired for. And no, some of these guys are just errand interns trying to work their way up. Brooklyn nodded, scribbling furiously. And I was told you were his biggest prize, she said after a moment. Graduated top of your class. An excellent mind for business. Darren exhaled, his jaw tightening. I presume so. Brooklyn tapped the end of her pen against the notepad. An excellent mind for business. She studied him again. Is that how you were able to afford this house in just a month? Darren didn't answer. Brooklyn smirked. And what about Lily Smithers? Was it because of her father that you broke up with her? A sharp tension filled the air. Darren's expression darkened. His fingers flexed. All right. We're done here, he said abruptly, standing up. Brooklyn frowned. Just a few more, but he was already moving toward the door, pulling it open. His stance was firm, unwavering. No. The interview is over. She tried to squeeze in another question, but he gestured toward the exit. Firm. Not aggressive. Not rude. Just final. Realizing she'd pushed too far, Brooklyn sighed and grabbed her recorder. As she stepped out, he slammed the door on her face. She grimaced. Well, thank you for your time, she yelled at him through the door. She stared at it for a moment before shaking her head, and sighing. That was interesting. The cameraman gave her a questioning gesture. She flashed him a thumbs up. He nodded and climbed into the van. Brooklyn lingered a moment longer, looking back at the door. She grinned. Darren Steele, she murmured. I thought you were just some insignificant boy who stumbled into an overwhelming situation. But you're way more interesting than I thought. She turned and headed towards the van. I'll be keeping an eye on you, Blue Eyes. With that, she climbed in, and they drove off. There weren't many offices as opulent as this one. It reeked of wealth and affluence, the very air thick with the scent of old money and power. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed a panoramic view of the city skyline, its twinkling lights illuminated the polished mahogany furniture with a glow of gold. At the center of the room was a vast, handcrafted desk that boasted of perfectly crafted gold inlays, its surface gleaming under the warm glow of an ornate chandelier. Plush leather chairs sat in invitation, and the scent of aged whiskey mingled with the faint trace of imported cigars. Every detail: marble floors, oil paintings of historic magnates, the quiet hum of an air purifier whispered of a man who had clawed his way to the top and intended to stay there. But despite the grandeur, a visitor appeared to be having a bad hair day of sorts. Gareth Smithers looked anything but composed. He sat in a chair, his thick fingers drumming anxiously on the desk, his face pale beneath his neatly groomed blonde hair. He grunted and rubbed his face. On his hand was a handwriting note with details of his recent scandal. Gareth was filled with unease as he exhaled sharply and said, "What do you think, Richard?" The man seated beside him barely moved at first. He exuded an effortless confidence, his presence commanding in a way that required no theatrics. Richard Morrison was in his early 50s, yet time had only refined him, not diminished him. He was a man whose charm came as naturally as breathing. He had features that women of any age would drool at the sight of. His face was strikingly symmetrical. He possessed sharp cheekbones and a chiseled jawline. His eyes were domineering and dark, always seeming to see more than they let on. He wore a tailored, intricately crafted suit, black with linings of regal blue, and cufflinks made of real silver. His voice, when he finally spoke, was smooth and deliberate, the kind that could sell a dream or a nightmare with equal ease. "A damn shame Archibald couldn't see to this himself," he said with a soft sigh. "I have my own problems to deal with." His eyes moved to Gareth, seeing the fear in his eyes. "Well," Richard said, crossing one leg over the other, "it's not ideal, Gareth. But it's also not unsalvageable. The press is a beast, it feeds on scandal, but it also gets bored quickly. The key is to redirect its hunger elsewhere." Gareth exhaled heavily, running a hand over his face once more. "Goddamn vultures. Those kids, those insufferable meddling kids. They want to ruin me. And those allegations are absolute lies. You know me, Richard." Richard tilted his head slightly, a blank look on his face. "Do I?" Gareth scowled. "Damn it, Richard. This could bury me." Richard leaned back, inspecting the cuff of his sleeve before answering. "It could. If you let it." Gareth heaved a sigh and sat back, tapping his feet on the ground restlessly. He eyed Richard Morrison and swallowed. To be honest, he was intimidated by the man. Greatly. Even though Archibald was richer and more powerful than Richard, Gareth still had a closer friendship with him because of his eruptive character. But Richard was too enigmatic for Gareth to figure out. He was no ordinary businessman. In fact, he had started as a doctor, a young and ambitious man who had once sworn to heal. But healing alone had never been enough, not when he saw the kind of money that passed hands in the world of medicine. He had built a reputation, a name, and then something far more valuable, influence. From his private practice, he had expanded into pharmaceuticals, then into medical technology. And then he invested in hospitals, which led him into the world of business, taking him down the path of real estate and high-end security firms. His company was amongst the only 3 empire companies in California. Morrison's Hospitals and Medical Group. However, under his brand, Morrison's Registered, he owned multiple companies. He owned Morrison's Capital, an investment firm with assets exceeding $40 billion, making it one of the largest private equity firms in the state. Each quarter, Morrison Capital generated over $1.2 billion in revenue, with its real estate holdings alone spanning more than 50 commercial skyscrapers, 200 luxury properties, and 1,500 acres of prime urban land. Beyond finance, Richard controlled Morrison's Biotech, a pharmaceutical giant valued at $60 billion, known for producing high-profit, patented medications. The company owned 5 private research labs, 6 major production facilities, and a chain of hospitals under Morrison's Hospitals, which catered exclusively to the upper class. His pharmaceuticals dominated 45% of the prescription drug market in the state, ensuring that even the most powerful individuals relied on him for their health. Morrison's Global Security, one of his subsidiaries, employed over 3,000 ex-military and intelligence personnel, operating in both domestic and foreign sectors. Several governors and senators owed their safety to Morrison's men, granting him direct political leverage in state affairs. Even media was under his grasp. Richard held controlling shares in 3 major news networks, subtly shaping public narratives to suit his interests. His PR firm, Morrison Strategies, specialized in reputation management, silencing scandals, crushing political opponents, and elevating his allies. One of the 3 major news networks he had shares in, was Business Everyday. Richard was a multi-billionaire. But even more than that, he was a force. And now, Gareth Smithers was sitting in his office, and he watched the man with amusement at the desperation in his eyes. "I could help you, Gareth," Richard finally said. "But, there's something I need from you in return." Gareth frowned, leaning forward. "And what would that be?" Richard's smile didn't falter. "Your company operates as a hybrid investment advisory and financial escrow service, correct? You help investors determine where to put their money, hold their funds until a deal is solidified, and then distribute accordingly." Gareth nodded. "Yes, and..." Richard steepled his fingers. "I need a particular transaction to disappear. A rather large sum, moved discreetly, without a trace." Gareth's eyes narrowed. "You're asking me to launder money?" Richard let out a low chuckle. "That's such an ugly word." "No, I'm asking you to facilitate a business arrangement." He looked at Gareth carefully. "Do not act like this is beneath you, Gareth. I'll feel insulted. A certain asset of mine simply needs to move a substantial amount through legitimate channels. If your company were to oversee that transfer, ensuring no inconvenient eyes followed the trail, I'd consider your little PR nightmare taken care of." Gareth hesitated, weighing the risk. Richard's influence was undeniable, but so was the danger of being caught in something like this. Still, if it meant survival. He inhaled sharply. "Fine." Richard's grin widened. "Good." Then he turned his head slightly, his gaze flickering toward the third man in the room. "What do you think, Anders? Can you smoothen out this situation for your client? I give you the green light." Ryan Anders had remained silent until now, standing by the expansive window, hands clasped behind his back. He shared a striking resemblance to Richard, sharp features, a refined elegance, and an air of meticulous calculation. The sunlight reflected off the glass as he watched the cars drive by. His voice, when it came, was smooth but laced with distraction. "My time and efforts are rather preoccupied with finding a certain mystery investor who's begun making waves in the rising cryptocurrency world." Then he turned around, his gaze locking onto Gareth's. "But I'm sure I can help you, Mr. Gareth." Gareth swallowed hard, glancing between the two men. "Good." Richard chuckled, unfolding a newspaper with a satisfied hum. "Very good." The door opened and closed in a hurry. Gareth Smithers stepped out of the lavish office and rested his back on the door. He exhaled, long and deep, his shoulders loosening slightly. He had always been fearful of meetings with Richard Morrison, the man's aura was really terrifying. But at least Morrison had given his word. This mess would go away. He sneered. "Those bastards think they could tarnish my career." The thought fueled his irritation. A bunch of disgruntled nobodies trying to pull him down? He had built Smithers Group into a financial juggernaut, an investment advisory firm that managed billions in capital, oversaw high-profile investment trends, and safeguarded financial transactions for the elite. His reputation was everything, and he wasn't about to let it be destroyed by insufferable, meddling kids with their naive sense of justice. This was going to go away. Nothing would happen to him. He reminded himself. But then, his thoughts drifted into what had happened back inside the office. Ryan Anders had leaned back against the window, his gaze as cold as the glass he looked through. His presence was deceptively relaxed, hands tucked behind his back, lips curled in a smirk that never quite reached his eyes. "Is there anyone who could testify against you?" Ryan asked. "Anyone that, if the media gets to, could give good reasons with evidence for some of the claims against you." His tone was calm, casual even, but Gareth knew better. This wasn't a question. It was a warning. Ryan's fingers drummed lightly against the back of his hand. "Moon Wealth Management offices can only manage your wealth and profile if you're thorough. Tell me now so we can deal with them quickly." Settle them with a fitting price. Gareth had swallowed thickly. I'll think of names. Ryan had only smiled. Now, standing in the hallway, Gareth already had one name in mind. Darren Steele. That fucker. The one who had started all of this. The one who had given everyone the audacity to challenge him. If Darren hadn't dared to resign, if he hadn't been so insistent, the others wouldn't have had the courage to come forward. Gareth's jaw tightened. He needed Steele silenced. He turned to his left, where a woman stood in poised stillness, waiting for him. Rachel. She stepped forward gracefully, her heels clicking against the marble floor. She was Rachel Teschmacher, Gareth's stunning personal secretary. Rachel was the kind of woman that commanded attention with just her presence. She was breathtakingly beautiful. Not the soft, delicate kind, but the kind that turned heads and made men forget their words. The kind that terrified people, that made them know it was safe to only admire, not speak. Her rich dark brown hair cascaded over one eye, giving her this enthralling style of mystery and seduction. Her face was flawless, full lips painted in a muted red, and her only visible eye shone silver blue. An eye that rarely betrayed emotion. She was dressed in a fitted crimson blouse tucked into a pencil skirt that hugged every perfect curve, her toned legs accentuated by black stilettos. Rachel was very reserved and quiet. Many had these opinions of her in the office, calling her the silent witch. Not because she barely spoke, but also because whenever a conversation was going on, once she passed through, everyone would fall silent and stare or hide their faces. She looked at Gareth with quiet patience. Yes, sir. Darren Steele, he said. You remember that boy, don't you? Rachel's expression didn't change, but there was a flicker, a slight tension in the way she adjusted her stance. She folded her arms, lips parting as if to say something, then closing again. Yes, she said finally. I remember. Gareth spoke without care. He lives in Male Green Street. Lily will tell you the house. I want you to go there and reach a settlement with him. Rachel tilted her head slightly. A settlement? Yes, a damn settlement. Keep his mouth shut, Gareth said bluntly. Make him state a price, because I'm sure money is all a person like him needs. It's what he wanted in the first place, right? Rachel didn't know if that was a rhetorical question. However, she still nodded her head. But, Gareth continued, his voice dropping, make sure he agrees and signs a contract to keep his mouth shut. Rachel held his gaze for a long moment. Then she gave a single, professional nod. Understood. I will be on my way, sir. She turned on her heels and strode down the hall, almost kept walking in a fluid, controlled, walking style as her heels clicked rhythmically. Meanwhile, in Male Green Street, Darren Steele frowned as he stepped up to his front door. He hadn't been here for a few days, but he was certain that he had locked the door. He pushed the door wider, stepping in cautiously, his body language tense. He scanned everywhere, but there was no one inside the house. No footprints, no signs of a struggle. But in his bedroom, his laptop was open. Darren cursed. What the hell happened here? He hurried to check the computer and as he expected, it was still locked. Whoever had come in had attempted, but was unable to open it. But then his eyes fell on something else. A receipt copy on the edge of the desk, almost out of his line of sight. It was a minor one for his property purchase in Green Baby. He'd taken it to keep safe as well in this house, while the main copy remained in the mansion. Darren's eyes narrowed. Was this how Brooklyn Baker had found him? His jaw clenched. He turned to his desk, fingers flying over his keyboard. System, he muttered, withdraw all available information on Brooklyn Baker. Brooklyn Baker, this was a new feature Darren had unlocked a few days ago called Personal Insight Protocol. It worked just the same as the one for companies, but gave in-depth information on people rather. Seconds later, her profile appeared on his screen. Personal Insight Protocol is complete information on subject is as follows: full name, Brooklyn Andrea Baker, age, 28, occupation, investigative journalist, senior correspondent at Business Everyday, education, Columbian University, Journalism Awards, Pulitzer Prize finalist, Investigative Journalism Award, 2009, Truth Seekers Honor Medal, address, 42 Pinecone Lane, Evergreen, Colorado 80439, phone number 303-5550127. Darren scanned quickly through it all, and once he got her number, he dialed. Brooklyn was striding hastily into a tall brownstone building, a file clutched in her hand. She had been chasing leads all day, and this was her next stop. As her phone buzzed in her pocket, she pulled it out and answered without stopping. Brooklyn Baker here. How can I help you? Did you break into my house? Darren demanded. Brooklyn paused, checked the number and frowned. Who's this? She then recognized the voice. Is this Darren Steele? Ha, she chuckled. How did you get my number? Darren's fingers clenched around the phone. Did you break into my house? Did you search it? Is that how you found my new address? She gave a soft, amused hum. I don't know what you're talking about, Mr. Steele. But I am flattered that you went through the trouble of getting my number. Do save it. I'm saving yours. She ended the call before he could respond and slipped the phone back into her pocket. Her expression smoothed as she reached a door, rapping her knuckles against it. Hello? Miss Sandy Myers, she called, tilting her head slightly to listen for movement inside. I was hoping I could have a moment of your time. Back in his house, Darren scowled, his fists clenching. If she was the one, knock. Knock, his entire body went still. Thinking that could be the intruder returning, Darren quietly walked to the kitchen and grabbed a knife. The knock came again. He moved carefully, silently, blade in hand. Then, with a careful exhale, he cracked the door slightly open to see who it was. A woman. He opened it fully, hiding the knife behind him. Not just any woman, it was the silent witch standing before him, looking up at him with those sharp, unreadable eyes. Hello, Mr. Steele, Rachel Teschmacher greeted. Darren stood at his doorstep, his grip tightening around the doorknob, the knife still hidden behind him. If it wasn't the intruder that was returning, he had at least expected it to be a lot of other things: a nosy neighbor, another journalist sniffing for a story, maybe even an old friend like Rico showing up unannounced. But the silent witch? Rachel Teschmacher? That was unexpected. However, there she was, standing on his small porch, poised as always. Her brown hair framed her sharp, attractive features, one eye obscured by a sleek curtain of hair. Even though they had not spoken or crossed paths that many times, Darren knew she was an extreme beauty. She had the kind of beauty that made men turn their heads without realizing it, a presence that commanded attention in any room. In a fitted blouse tucked into a high-waisted pencil skirt, she looked every bit the professional. And then there was that coldness in her eyes. As though she knew she was better than everyone else, or she cared little for anything except what she was told to do. Hello, Mr. Steele, she said smoothly. Darren's first instinct was caution. His house had already been broken into once, and now Gareth's secretary was here, out of nowhere. That didn't sit right. He folded his arms, leaning against the doorframe. You're Gareth's secretary, he said. Rachel. That is correct. Though her face was mainly expressionless, Darren could see her glancing him over multiple times. She didn't seem to recognize him that much with his new look. What are you doing here? He asked. I just want to talk. Talk? He lifted a brow. You and I have never spoken before and you show up here wanting to talk. What could we even talk about? Rachel remained composed, hands clasped neatly in front of her. I do not intend to be hostile. Darren studied her for a second, then he leaned back, understanding what could be happening. Gareth sent you, didn't he? Rachel hesitated for a moment before answering, yes. Darren paused. He and Gareth Smithers had not had any sort of communication ever since that day. Clearly, if he was making a kind of threat, he would have sent men. But since he had sent an attractive woman such as his secretary, it meant she wasn't here to threaten him. She was here to fix something. To give him an offer. Most likely, if he rejected this offer, Gareth would send Lily knocking on Darren's door. Darren glanced past Rachel, checking the street. He didn't trust that she had come alone. I'm not letting you in until you tell me exactly what this is about, he said. Rachel sighed, as if dealing with a difficult client. I assure you, this isn't a trap. I just want a conversation. Nothing more. She held his gaze, unwavering, patient. Darren hesitated, then stepped aside. Fine. Make it quick. She walked in, her heels clicking against the wooden floor, her eyes scanning the space as if taking mental notes. From her perspective, the place was modest and neat, certainly not the kind of house one would expect for someone going against a billionaire like Gareth Smithers. It was a family house, with all its memories etched in every corner of it. It made her feel a bit nostalgic as she remembered her own home. Darren shut the door and moved past her. He went to the fridge, but could only find water and a can of malt. Drink, he offered. I'm fine. He took a bottle of water for himself and sat down on the armrest of his couch, watching her as she surveyed the room before finally turning to face him. Rachel always had a way of making things feel like an interview, even when she wasn't holding a notepad. Darren lifted a brow. You can take a seat if you want. I'm fine, she said again. He leaned forward. All right. Talk. Smoothing out a non-existent wrinkle in her skirt, she began. You're aware of the reports about Gareth? Reports? Darren feigned ignorance. I'm not aware of it at all. Rachel's eyes squeezed in slightly, like she was surprised by that answer. Multiple reports have been made against Mr. Smithers, including plagiarizing young individuals and sexual harassment. Darren frowned. First time I'm hearing that. Rachel wasn't sure she believed that. Either way, the press is going to come looking for you. Since you were the first to do what you did, they'll want your opinion, your side of the story. She appeared more serious. Darren Steele, you could help the scandal grow, or you could walk away with a generous offer. Darren scoffed. Let me guess. Gareth wants to make this go away? A nice check to keep my mouth shut. Rachel met his gaze. Yes. The bluntness of it made Darren chuckle. No hesitation, huh? There's no point in pretending, Mr. Steele. Everyone has a price. Darren leaned back, studying her. She wasn't flustered, not even slightly uncomfortable. She was here to do a job, and she was damn good at it. But she had miscalculated. Accept me it seems, he said simply. What? Rachel asked. I don't want the money, Darren replied. Rachel blinked, just once. If she was surprised, she didn't show it. You don't want money? No. She tilted her head, assessing him. Then what do you want? Darren grimaced, looking down, then to his left and right, reliving memories. What I want is for Gareth Smithers to get what's coming for him. Every single one of those complaints, those reports, those allegations. He did it himself. And he should suffer the consequences. Darren then stared at her. You know it's true. And you should be disgusted to be aiding in covering up. I don't care if he's your boss. Rachel's expression appeared to have changed for a moment. She lowered her head with something that appeared to be shame. Then, she took a slow breath and lifted her gaze to meet his. "You know," she said with a steady voice. "I was right about you." Her lips moved nervously. "I'm glad." Darren's brow furrowed. "What's that supposed to mean?" She looked down once again, and once she found more courage, looked up. With a little hesitation, she said, "I was the one who made the sexual harassment allegation." Silence. Darren's expression froze. The words hit him like a sledgehammer to the chest. He felt overwhelmed for a moment, like he was a whirlwind of crazy thoughts. His mind struggled to process them, as if he'd misheard, as if his brain refused to accept the meaning behind them. He stared at Rachel, waiting for her to correct herself, to say she was joking, to say anything but that. But then, it started to make sense. The way she was always alone. How she never interacted with anyone in office. It was always to Gareth Smithers' office and out. Nowhere else. It wasn't that difficult to believe. Office harassment most often involved the boss and the secretary. Darren blinked, now seeing Rachel in a completely different light. "You're the one who reported him for sexual assault." His voice faltered before he could finish the word. His throat felt tight, breath becoming uneven. "Gareth assaulted you." Rachel didn't answer right away. Her posture was as reserved as ever, shoulders squared, chin lifted, as if she was forcing herself to remain composed. But the hesitation, the way her fingers curled into her palm, the way her lips pressed together, trembling slightly. It was all the confirmation he needed. Then, slowly, she nodded. Darren exhaled sharply. "Gareth Smithers. You bastard." His pulse pounded in his ears. A sickening mix of emotions swirled inside him, anger, disbelief, disgust, and something deeper, something heavier. It had to be resentment. Darren resented that piece of trash called Gareth Smithers. As angry as he was, he did his best to keep most of his concentration on Rachel. He studied her face, the way she held herself, the way she clenched her jaw as if bracing for something. "He didn't just do it once, did he?" he asked softly. Rachel sucked in a shaky breath. And then, for the first time, she broke. Her expression cracked, her mask of cold professionalism shattering as tears welled in her eyes. The file in her hand fell. When she spoke, it was bloated out by a weak, choked sob. "No." That single word carried more pain than he could ever comprehend. She turned away slightly, as if ashamed, as if unwilling to let him see her in this state. But she spoke. She told him everything. How it started. How Gareth had taken advantage of his power, his influence. How he had trapped her, threatened her, made her feel small, helpless. Like usual, he'd made his threat to blacklist her in every company. He was a powerful man. She knew he could do it. She told Darren how every day she went to work fearing if he would do it again. She told him how she had tried to endure, tried to push through, hoping it would stop. But it never did. And no one ever noticed it. Those that did. The higher-ups. They never questioned it. Because he was Gareth Smithers. Because he was powerful. Because men like him didn't face consequences. "I felt worthless." Rachel's voice was barely audible now. "Helpless. And at the same time, I felt guilty because I believed that there was something I could have done. Maybe I should have been stronger. But I just let it happen." Darren's hands clenched into fists. He wanted to tell her she didn't let anything happen. He wanted to tell her it wasn't her fault, that Gareth was the one to blame. But he knew now wasn't the time to interrupt. Rachel swallowed hard, wiping at her tears with the back of her hand. "And then, you." She looked at him now, her eyes filled with something raw, something desperate. "You were the first to stand up to him. You actually escaped unharmed." And I knew from that moment on that I could do it too. I might not act like it, but I look up to you, Darren Steele. Like some symbol of hope. I know it's cliché and stupid, but... Her voice faded away. Darren stared at her, still processing her words. You're not really here to get me to sign anything, are you? He asked. Thankfully, his voice was calm. Rachel didn't answer immediately. I'm afraid to go back, she admitted. And I needed to know. She took a breath, steadying herself. I needed to know if you'd take the deal. If you'd just accept it and walk away like everyone else. But you didn't. I was right about you. Darren exhaled slowly. Ding. The system notified him. This person is saying the truth, ding. This person wants to put their whole trust in you, ding. This person is desperate for your aid. He looked at her again, seeing not just the composed, professional woman she always presented herself as, but someone who had been suffering in silence for far too long. Then, she whispered, voice breaking, please help me, Darren. I don't want to go back there. She had held back for so long, but now the dam had burst. She broke down completely, silent tears turning into sobs. Darren didn't even think. He stood up, walked toward her, and before he could stop himself, he covered her with his arms. Rachel stiffened at first, shocked. She hadn't expected this, neither had he. But then, slowly, she sank into the embrace, clutching his shirt as she cried. You're the only one I've told, she whispered. Darren looked down at her, his expression firm. And you're one of the only people to judge me by character. To you, I don't have money or any kind of power, but you trusted my character to help you. She raised her head and looked into his stern blue eyes. I have nowhere else to go, she admitted. Gareth is a powerful man, and he has even more powerful friends. He'll find me. Darren pulled back slightly, just enough to meet her own eyes. That doesn't matter, he said with a resolute tone. What he did to you is wrong. Horribly wrong. And I promise you, I'm going to make him pay for it. But for now, my first promise is that you'll never have to see him again. You'll never have to work there. You'll never have to do anything he says. Rachel looked at him, confused. Darren? What do you mean? I'm still employed to him by contract. That'll be handled by tomorrow, Darren said. His tone left no room for argument. You're here because you believed I could help you. That is what I'll do. But first, I need you to trust me. He looked at her with fierce determination in his blue gaze. Rachel, do you trust me? She gazed at him, searching his face for any sign of hesitation. Then, finally, she answered. Yes. I trust you. Darren nodded. Good. Because as long as I'm with you, no one is going to touch you. Mrs. Myers, please. Just a moment of your time, that's all I'm asking for. Brooklyn Baker stood outside a modest, neatly kept apartment, her knuckles rapping firmly against the wooden door. It was the fourth time she had knocked and yet there was no answer. Heaving a breath, she adjusted her blazer and checked the time. Still no response. She knocked again, a little harder this time. Finally, the door creaked open. A woman stood there, barely peeking out. Sandy Myers. She looked fairly young for her age of 33. Shoulder-length auburn hair, deep brown eyes. She appeared exhausted. Not physically, but there was a weariness in her expression that Brooklyn instantly recognized someone who had seen too much and was tired of pretending otherwise. Nevertheless, Brooklyn also couldn't deny that she was a stunning woman. Even with her hair all messy, she looked beautiful. Sandy blinked at her, expression cautious. Can I help you? Brooklyn kept her voice neutral. Sandy Myers. My name is Brooklyn Baker. I'm a journalist with Business Everyday. I'd like to ask you a few questions. Just a simple interview. Sandy's fingers tightened slightly around the doorframe. Her voice was wary. About what? Gareth Smithers. A flicker of something crossed Sandy's face. It wasn't surprise. She'd been expecting this to catch up with her eventually. Not speaking, she stood there for a while, staring at Brooklyn. Brooklyn waited. She'd seen this reaction before, people deciding if they should open the door or slam it shut. Finally, Sandy exhaled. Fine. Come in. Brooklyn stepped inside, scanning the apartment quickly. It was tidy but lived in. A small living room with an old but comfortable-looking couch. A wooden coffee table stacked with financial reports and a laptop. No decorations, no unnecessary clutter. Just the essentials. It felt very feminine with the colors and the arrangement of appliances. A place of function and a woman's comfort. Sit wherever, Sandy said, closing the door. She didn't sound enthusiastic, but she didn't sound like she regretted letting Brooklyn in either. Brooklyn chose the armchair across from the couch, pulling out her recorder. Just so you know, I'm recording this conversation. Sandy shrugged as she sat down. Doesn't matter. Brooklyn got straight to it. Are you aware of the numerous allegations against Gareth Smithers? Sandy's lips pressed into a thin line. Brooklyn continued. Accusations of plagiarism, of locking employees into unfair contracts, of stealing their work and discarding them. And. She paused, watching Sandy's reaction, 2 allegations of sexual assault from former female employees. Sandy exhaled through her nose. Yeah, she said. I'm aware. Brooklyn's eyes narrowed. How? Sandy met her gaze. Because I was the one who started them. Bullseye. Brooklyn's pulse quickened, but outwardly, she remained composed. My instincts had been right. I knew there was something about Sandy Myers that warranted questioning. And now, I've hit a jackpot. She leaned forward slightly. You were his financial secretary, Miss Myers. Your voice carries power here. Tell me everything. Sandy let out a slow breath, running a hand through her hair. I worked for Gareth for 6 years. Secretary of Finance, as you know. She sighed. What you don't know is what it's like to watch brilliant young people come in, full of ideas, creativity, and passion, only to have it all drained from them. Her voice quickly sounded bitter. I saw it happen over and over. They were chewed up and spit out. Their work stolen. Their names erased. And if they dared to leave? Contracts bound them. They weren't allowed to criticize the company. Some weren't even allowed to work in their field for months after quitting. Brooklyn didn't react. She just listened and wrote. Sandy sighed. At some point, I got numb. Watching it made me depressed. What could I do? I was locked into the same contract. I had no power. No leverage. And then, one day, he hired this business and finance graduate for an intern position. Darren Steele. Brooklyn's brows perked. Darren Steele. Sandy nodded. Yeah. Are you familiar with him? Brooklyn didn't confirm or deny. He's a person of interest. A small, tired smile flickered on Sandy's lips. Figures. She leaned back. Darren was no different at first. He was excited to be there. But, he stood out from every other one because he was the smartest guy I've ever met. He knew numbers. I mean, like crazy. He knew money, investments, graphs, everything. He was brilliant. And he cared. He wanted to do something with all that knowledge, make real changes. I was afraid he'd get crushed like the others. Unknown to her, he actually did get crushed. At least in another timeline. Brooklyn stayed silent. But then he did something no one else had ever done. Sandy's expression turned almost amused. He found a way out. He somehow altered the contract and freed himself. Just like that. No lawsuits. No battles. He just walked away. The moment he left, the cracks started showing. Others realized they could do it too. I left first. Then the others followed. And once I was free, I sent a letter to the whispering press with everything. Every name, every case of theft, every young person Gareth had used and thrown away. She paused. I guess they handed it over to you guys at business every day. Brooklyn absorbed the information, her fingers danced on the paper till she rose her head again. This contract alteration. How did Darren do it? She asked. Sandy blinked, taken aback. Out of everything I just told you, that's what you're asking. Brooklyn remained unfazed. Sandy scoffed, shaking her head. Do you even care about any of this? Brooklyn shrugged. It doesn't matter if I care or not. My job is to report the news as it is. Sandy's jaw tightened. That's all this is to you. The reporter sighed, rubbing her temple. Look. Miss Myers. Sandy. Sandy corrected her. Brooklyn sighed. Sandy. I'm a reporter. I don't bring justice to people. I report what's already happening. Now, if the law officials decide to act on it once I bring it to light, then good for you. Sandy's eyes darkened. Good for me? You heartless woman. Get out. We're done here. Brooklyn didn't get up. Instead, once Sandy got close enough, she stopped her with a question. You admire him, don't you? Sandy instantly stiffened. Brooklyn smirked. Darren Steele. The way you talk about him. You clearly admire him. Dare I say you like him more than you let on. Sandy's expression hardened. I don't know what you're talking about. Brooklyn pouted. How did he get so rich so fast? What? Brooklyn's eyes narrowed. Oh. So you don't know. She tilted her head, watching Sandy's reaction carefully. Darren Steele has $1 million mansion now. A luxury car worth even more. He never told you. Doesn't he hold you in the same regard that you hold him? Feeling stung by that, Sandy chuckled after, though it wasn't out of amusement. You're good, she said, shaking her head. As a reporter. As an instigator. Poking me, reading my reactions, pushing just enough to get more. But let me ask you something. She leaned in smugly. Are you this curious because you want to uncover the truth, or because you want to know more about Darren? Brooklyn frowned. Sandy smirked. I think you're the one who likes him more than you let on. Brooklyn's face remained unreadable for a second too long. Then, abruptly, she stood up. You don't know what you're talking about. She turned for the door but stopped. Then, she took a deep breath, turned back with a big, formal smile on her face. Thanks for your time, Miss Myers. And with that, she left. Sandy stood there, staring at the door long after it closed. Only one thought was in her mind, Darren is rich. The next day, early that morning, in the headquarters of Smithers Group, Gareth Smithers paced back and forth in his spacious, mahogany-lined office. He was grunting and muttering to himself. His fingers twitched with irritation as he pressed the call button on his office phone for the 10th time that morning. The sharp, rhythmic beeping that signaled an unanswered call rang in his ears like an unbearable siren. Still no response. Gareth's jaw clenched as he grabbed his personal phone, quickly going through his messages. Where the hell are you? Why haven't you returned with news? Did Darren Steele accept the settlement? Answer me, Rachel. Nothing. Not a single reply. His secretary had been completely off the grid since he sent her on an errand yesterday. It was unheard of. Unacceptable. Disrespectful. No one ever dared disrespected him before. What's this going on? Why did it feel like his company was crumbling right before his eyes? Gareth's grip tightened on the phone. His patience, already threadbare, finally snapped. "Where is my secretary?" he bellowed, slamming his fist on the polished oak desk. The impact sent a pen holder clattering to the ground. He hit redial again. The call went straight to voicemail. Gareth seethed, chest heaving, face burning red with fury. He sent another furious text, then another. His thumbs pounded against the buttons of his Nokia like they were trying to shatter it. Then a dark thought crept into his mind. Had Darren Steele done something to her? That bloody fucker. That meddling pest. That bastard. Steele. The old man could not control his rage. The idea of it alone sent his blood pressure skyrocketing. He grabbed the phone, raised it above his head, and hurled it against the wall. Crash. The device shattered into pieces upon impact, a spray of plastic and glass scattering across the office floor. A guttural growl tore from his throat. His hands curled into fists, his nostrils flared, and his body trembled with rage. Then, his eyes snapped toward the door. "Lily," he roared. "Get in here. Now. Lily." All the way on the other side of the city, a beautiful hotel stood amongst other buildings. The Golden Los Alvarez Hotel was a symbol of wealth, luxury, and exclusivity. Situated near the heart of Los Alvarez, California, this branch of the prestigious Golden Hotel chain catered only to the elite. Its grand entrance was adorned with towering marble pillars, and an expansive, red-carpeted driveway stretched before it, where black sedans and Rolls-Royces pulled up to deliver their distinguished guests. The revolving glass doors led into a lobby bathed in golden light, where a massive chandelier dangled from the vaulted ceiling, its crystal facets catching the light like a sea of diamonds. The reception area was lined with sleek black counters, where elegantly dressed concierges attended to guests with practiced smiles. Plush velvet sofas were scattered throughout, occupied by men in tailored suits and women draped in designer gowns. A single room in this hotel did not come cheap. Here, a standard suite cost nearly $2,500 a night, and the penthouses? Well, those were reserved for millionaires and foreign dignitaries willing to shell out tens of thousands for a single stay. Inside one of the lavish suites, Rachel Teschmacher sat on the edge of a king-sized bed, her fingers trembling slightly as she clutched her phone. Her dull blue eyes were locked on the screen, where Gareth's name appeared over and over again in missed calls and unread messages. "Where are you? You better pick up now. Come back. Or else." Her lips parted slightly, her breath uneven. The threats were unspoken but clear. Gareth was growing impatient. Gareth had warned her before the things he could do if he ever betrayed her. She knew them all. And that was what terrified her. A sharp knock on the door made her jolt. She looked up, and there stood Darren Steele. The tension in her shoulders eased just slightly. Seeing him was like an ice cube falling into boiling water, melting her fears away. She walked to him and lifted the phone, showing him the screen and the relentless calls and messages. "He won't stop calling, and texting. I don't know what to do." Darren's face was expressionless. He took the phone from her hand, looked at the screen for a second, then without hesitation, let it slip from his fingers. The device hit the marble floor with a crack. Then, still saying nothing, he brought his shoe down and crushed it beneath his heel. The crunching sound echoed in the room. Rachel gasped, her eyes widening. She wanted to ask what he was doing, but Darren spoke. "I'll get you a new one," he said flatly. His voice was subtle. "I don't want you seeing anything that'll make you worry." She gazed up at him, her heart pounding. He had been the one to bring her here, to hide her away in this hotel, knowing full well that Gareth would have sent people to search her home first. There were many other hotels in the city too, but it felt like Darren had methodically picked this one. Perhaps, there was something about this one. Most of the hotels in the city did in one way or the other connect to Archibald Mooney and Richard Morrison, who were both Gareth's allies. Darren must have had his reasons for picking this one. Dashed down in the hallways of Golden Hay, a group of sharply dressed businessmen strolled with a young boy at the center. The boy, no older than 22, looked slightly overwhelmed as the men guided him through the hotel corridors. "This is one of your properties now, Grant," one of the men told him with a smile. "The Golden Hay Los Alvarez is just one of many. Your father built an empire," another added. "Now, it's your turn to take charge." Grant Hayes nodded hesitantly, his gaze shifting around the grand hallway, taking in the opulence of the hotel he now owned. The chandeliers, the polished floors, the towering windows, it was all his. It had happened in a rush. His father suddenly dying and all he owned being placed under his name. Grant wasn't even a business major. He feared that he didn't know what he was doing and was going to let his father down. As they rounded a corner, his eyes landed on a figure standing by one of the room doors. A man. Brown, neatly combed hair. Sharp posture. A stance that carried an air of quiet authority. Grant squinted slightly, his steps slowing. There was something familiar about him. Where have I seen this guy before? The answer was on the tip of his tongue. Maybe if he got closer he could see who the man was. Darren, oblivious to the men approaching his room, had his focus on Rachel. "Can I come in?" he asked her. "What?" Rachel stared at him. "Of course. Yes." Darren stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "No, wait." The door closed just as he got close enough. Grant was only able to see the room number. His companions kept talking, their voices blending into the background. But his thoughts were elsewhere. "I'm not so sure, but that looked like the same man from the casino." Grant's brow furrowed, head low. Was it really him? Now inside the elegant hotel suite with her, Darren stood in silence, his gaze fixed on Rachel. He looked at her for a moment, studying her carefully. Even though it has been almost a full day since she left Gareth, Darren could see she was still panicky. He saw the way her fingers tapped continuously on the back of her palm, the way her chest rose and fell in controlled breaths, but most of all, the uncertainty in her eyes. Despite her calm exterior, he could see it. Fear. "You look scared," he finally said with a low and deliberate voice. "Low. You shouldn't worry. I told you to trust me." Rachel's lips parted slightly before she gave a small nod. "I do trust you." Darren's eyes lingered on her for a moment. He said nothing more and shifted his attention to the room. The suite was spacious, designed with luxury in mind: dark wood furniture, cream-colored walls, a grand king-size bed with plush bedding. The soft glow from the chandelier overhead gave the place an inviting warmth. "How do you like it?" he asked. "Did the men bring your luggage in fine?" Rachel nodded. "Yes. They were professional." "The room is beautiful, Darren." "Thank you." "Really? Good," he said. "It's important that you like it. After all, this is where you'll be staying for a while until everything dies down." Rachel hesitated. "For how long?" "A month, at least. I'm thinking that's enough time until this matter has been put to bed. I've already paid for it, you'll have nothing to worry about." His tone was so dominant and decisive, like he had taken charge over her life, controlling every problem she had, and leaving no room for argument. Not like she wanted to argue. "Those men you saw. They'll serve as your bodyguards." "Bodyguards?" "Yes. They'll be here at all times, and whenever you leave, they'll be close by as well. But you must make sure you're here always, Rachel." "It's impossible." Rachel nodded affirmatively and exhaled, processing everything. "Smithers will come looking for me soon, demanding where you are since he'd sent you to me, Darren continued. And when he does, I don't want you anywhere near that situation. I think it's best that you're not near him for now. You understand? She swallowed hard. Yes. I understand. Darren's sharp eyes settled back on her. He thought about a few things before he spoke. Before I smashed your phone, he asked, had you already called anyone important? A loved one, family member, anyone who could worry if they came looking for you at home and couldn't find you? Rachel nodded. I called my mother. And a few friends. Good, Darren said simply. They won't panic, then. Silence filled the space between them for a moment. For Rachel, she couldn't help the numerous emotions sizzling through her. Her gaze stayed on Darren, studying the man before her. For so long, her curiosity had lingered, questions brewing in her mind. Instead of asking them, she just obeyed submissively, accepting his help without questions like any thankful person would do. But there were still many questions, such as, how was he doing all this? The luxury hotel, the security, the seamless planning, none of it made sense. And she couldn't hold her curiosity back anymore. Darren was here now, so what better time to ask him? Darren. Can you tell me how, she finally asked. I am trying to make sense of it, but how are you able to do all this? Darren turned his gaze to her, calm and reserved in his expression. This hotel is extremely expensive, Rachel pressed. The men, the transport. How? You were an intern just last month. He stared at her for a long moment before offering a cryptic response. You'll find out soon. Rachel frowned, but before she could push further, Darren spoke again. I was curious though. You'll need a job, right? He said casually with one raised brow. Since you are no longer working for Gareth. Rachel blinked, caught off guard. Yes. Darren crossed his arms. How about this? You become my secretary. Her breath hitched. Your secretary? You wouldn't need an interview, Darren continued thoughtfully, appearing almost nervous. I already know how good you are at your job. I trust your judgment and your skill. I could give you the position immediately if you want it. Rachel's heart pounded. She hadn't even considered her next career move yet. Hadn't even figured out what her future looked like after resigning. But even with all of this, the moment Darren offered the position, something inside her lit up. She didn't even know what business he was running. Or if there even was one. But it didn't matter. Rachel Teschmacher didn't hesitated. Yes, she said breathlessly. Huh. Darren was surprised at how easy that was. Yes. Yes, I'll be your secretary. He stared into her excited dull blue eyes, saw the way it glistened at the sight of him. Ding. The system sang. This person feels indebted to you. Is that why she's doing this? Because she feels indebted because I helped her. Ding. It came again. This person is very loyal to you. Oh. Darren's expression flickered with surprise at her enthusiasm. To be honest, he had expected a bit of hesitation, at least. Instead, she had accepted immediately, almost desperately. That's great to hear, he said, watching her closely. Frankly, I was almost worried you wouldn't accept. Rachel laughed. She had a beautiful reserved laugh. Are you kidding? Who else would I rather work for at this moment if not you? Gazing at her, Darren's face broke to a rare smile. Then his phone vibrated in his pocket. The smile vanished and he withdrew the device, glancing at the caller ID before answering. Yes. A voice on the other end responded. Mr. Steele, the building you inquired about? It's ready for inspection. We are awaiting your presence to speak. Darren nodded. I'll be there soon. He hung up and turned back to Rachel. I have to leave. The building I'm purchasing for the company is now available for me to review and finalize. Rachel's expression shifted into deep thought. Then, as Darren moved toward the door, she suddenly reached out and grabbed his hand. Wait. Darren stopped and turned to face her, seeing a determined expression on her face. I want to come with you, she said. His brows raised. No. It's too risky. I need to be there, she insisted. I'm your secretary now. I've handled property purchases before. I know how to manage these things. You'll need me there. Darren considered her words. She isn't wrong. Bringing her along could be good practice before the company officially starts operations. All right, he relented. But stay close to me at all times. Rachel looked up at him, a quiet intensity in her eyes. I will never leave your side, Mr. Steele. They shared a lock of gazes for a moment longer before he pulled her towards the door. Let's go. Arriving at Miravoord Avenue, Los Alvarez, Darren stepped out of the car, lifting his gaze to the large dome-like structure before him. It was a bright afternoon and the sky was painted in hues of bright blue and white, evidence of daylight clinging to the horizon. The glass dome scraper stood like a monolith. It was not very far from the hotel, and also not far from another property Darren had been considering. More importantly, it was in Miravoord Avenue, one of the most expensive business districts in the city. It was called the Helios Dome. A sleek masterpiece of modern architecture, its glass facade gleamed under the setting sun, reflecting the cityscape like a distorted dream. Unlike the other corporate towers around it built with sharp, imposing edges, the Helios Tower had an almost fluid design, curved to create a dome-like design. Because of this, it spiraled slightly as one ascended, giving the illusion of movement. It wasn't tall, but the glass was completely reflective, avoiding others from peering through, and the roof made it almost appear to be a stadium. Rachel stepped beside him, her gaze locked on the structure. She didn't speak for a long moment, merely studying it, as if confirming something in her mind. Then, in a voice smooth and calculated, she said, the Helios Tower. The pride of the Los Alvarez Skyline project. Originally commissioned a decade ago, but the original investors backed out due to financial instability. The city took it over, and after several hands, it was finally completed 2 years ago. State-of-the-art facilities, high-speed elevators, reinforced glass panels to withstand earthquakes and hurricanes. The cost. She turned to him, her sharp eyes gleaming. More than $100 million. That's just the base price. Renovations. Additional millions. Darren, are you really intending on buying it? Darren didn't react to the price. He simply tucked his hands into his coat pockets. Yes. Rachel exhaled, almost in disbelief. It's an empire disguised as a building, Darren. Her voice was steady, but there was something in it: curiosity, admiration. The seller, a short man with a graying beard and an expensive suit, approached them with a tight-lipped smile. His name was Mr. Graham, of the top real estate brokers in the district. Mr. Steele, he greeted, offering a hand. Darren shook it briefly. And Miss. The seller turned to Rachel. Rachel gave a sharp gaze. Not Miss. I'm Rachel Teschmacher. She's my secretary, Darren explained. Ah, Mr. Holloway chuckled, his gaze flickering to Darren. A young man like you, purchasing one of the most expensive commercial properties in Los Alvarez. Impressive. I must admit, when I first saw your offer, I assumed there was a mistake. Usually, men in your position tend to lease first. Rachel's entire demeanor shifted. Her head tilted slightly, her expression instantly turning to ice, then she spoke with a gentle voice that sent a chill through the air. I'm sorry, men in his position, she repeated. Are you being condescending to my boss, Mr. Graham? The seller hesitated, taken aback. I simply meant Mr. Steele looks quite young. The Helios Dome is not just an expensive property, it's a high-risk investment. It's rare for someone his age to make such a move without financial backers. Rachel's gaze darkened, but she didn't raise her voice. If youth is an issue, Mr. Graham, then perhaps I should remind you that the Zurich firm, one of the leading financial conglomerates in this district, is run by a CEO 2 years younger than Mr. Steele. Perhaps you'd like to tell them their position is inadequate too. Mr. Graham stiffened, his smile faltering. I of course not, Miss Teschmacher. Darren, watching the exchange, was mildly surprised. This side of her, this ruthless precision, this cold, commanding presence was what most people were used to. Yet, after seeing her vulnerable and uncertain just a few hours ago, the contrast was almost startling. She didn't merely defend him. She annihilated the slightest doubt. For the first time in a long time, someone stood in front of him, not behind him. He sighed, although ecstatic. It's fine, Rachel. I'm sure Mr. Graham meant no disrespect. His eyes darkened at the man. Right. Mr. Graham chuckled nervously. Yes. I meant no harm at all. He cleared his throat and gestured toward the building. Shall we proceed inside? Darren didn't respond immediately. His gaze flicked to Rachel. He raised a brow at her and she nodded. Together, they walked into the building. The grand lobby was immaculate black marble floors, floor-to-ceiling windows that bathed the space in golden light, and an open concept design that made everything feel vast. A glass elevator at the center led directly to the upper floors. Rachel took in every detail, her mind working like a machine. The foundation is strong, she noted. But the interior evidently needs work. The office spaces above are standard layouts, but I'd suggest restructuring the upper floors to accommodate executive offices. If you want a boardroom, the West Wing's panoramic view would be ideal. Mr. Graham blinked, caught off guard by her knowledge. You seem quite familiar with the property. Rachel didn't even glance at him. I don't know if you're underestimating me, Mr. Graham. I know every valuable property in this state. My only duty here is making sure my boss's money is well spent. Darren smirked slightly. Gosh, he was loving her already. She impressed him so much. He hadn't told her a thing about the building before arriving. So it was clear she already knew everything about this place. She was telling the truth. How could someone know every single valuable property in the state offhand? Rachel Teschmacher. A sharp mind. Stern. Unshakable. Intelligent. Darren liked that. He also liked that he didn't have to do a lot of work now. Not with her, he only had to worry about the money needed for investments. Rachel could deal with inspecting physical properties and assets just like this. After a full, detailed inspection was done as demanded by Rachel, they proceeded with negotiations. Mr. Graham presented the financial breakdown, but Rachel was unyielding. 20% of these costs are unnecessary, she pointed out, her tone never rising but cutting through the air like a scalpel. Reassess your estimates. The security system upgrades don't need outsourcing, we can hire an internal firm for half the price. And this, she motioned to a particular clause in the contract, is a ridiculous maintenance fee. Either we renegotiate this, or we take our business elsewhere. The seller, now visibly rattled, nodded quickly. Of course, of course. I'll have my team make the adjustments. In the end, Rachel had managed to bring the cost down to $82 million. However, it didn't exactly matter what the price was, Darren only had $30+ million to his name. But he also did have 80% discount on next major purchase. He activated the reward and Mr. Graham frowned at the computer before him, then chuckled. Hoo. Seems you're a very lucky man, or today's just your lucky day. This property has been lowered to an 80% discount by the government. Darren smirked inwardly. Good. I would have paid either way. The contract signing was done, many other long processes were complete, and soon evening began to encroach. They finalized the deal at last, led by Rachel's words and guidance. And rather than his mother, the Helios Dome was now the first property signed under Darren Steele's name. As they prepared to leave, Darren addressed the constructors. I want renovations to begin immediately. Also, a sign to the top of the building. I want it visible from every direction. The team nodded in acknowledgement. Darren and Rachel got into his car, and he leaned back and let out a deep breath. Rachel still appeared serious, arranging files. Darren turned, watching her. You know, Rachel. I think we're a match made in heaven. Even though she had spent the last hour as a cold, intimidating force, Rachel's face suddenly melted under his gaze. The steel in her expression softened. A small smile, genuine and warm, graced her lips. I think so too. She stared at him, as he turned on the engine and drove off. Ding. Company building successfully secured. The plans for the company were perfectly falling into place. Rachel was getting accustomed to her new home, multiple employment advertisements had been sent out, renovations had begun in the Helios Dome, and legal documents had begun drafted. Darren's company was already off to a smooth start, and he hadn't even decided on a name yet. That morning, he stepped out of his car, eyes scanning the quiet street before turning toward the modest apartment complex he had secured for the new head of his IT department. Cara DeAndre was a risk. Any major company and businessman would see her that way. Not only was she wild and unpredictable, but she was nosy and too skilled for her own good. But even though that was the case, no matter what Darren thought, she was his Cara now, and it would be unfair for him to kick her to the curb. Not only that, he saw outside the box. So far, her unorthodox methods had yielded great solutions for him. Her nosiness could become a powerful tool, uncovering hidden vulnerabilities in rival companies. Hiring her was a calculated risk. Obviously, Darren knew. But by channeling her skills with ethical guidelines and challenging projects, her too skilled nature can very well become an asset. She could turn his IT department into a proactive shield, proving that a hacker's mind could be the best defense. Perhaps I should move on with this standard, Darren thought. Hiring unconventional applicants for conventional roles. The apartment he had gotten her was fine enough for her heavy taste. Not too extravagant, at least not from the outside. The real value lay inside, where he had converted an entire room into a high-tech nerve center for her to perform his tasks. He walked up to the door and knocked once. A second later, the door flung open. Cara stood in the doorway, grinning up at him with sharp, knowing eyes. Her red hair was pulled into a messy bun, and she was surprisingly wearing sunglasses for some reason. She wore an oversized hoodie with a pixelated skull on it, paired with black leggings. Casual. Comfortable. Efficient. The usual Cara he had come to know. The sunglasses were still a question though. I know, Cara sighed, like she could tell he was curious about them. But I've been staring at computer screens the whole day. I have to protect these eyes. Darren smirked. She sized him up, almost watering at the thought of kissing him. You're late, she teased, stepping aside to let him in. Darren arched a brow. I didn't set a time. Yeah, well, I assumed you'd be early, she said, shutting the door behind him. Bosses tend to be like that. Darren ignored the jab, his eyes already scanning the room. The space had been transformed. Monitors rested close to the walls, a deep blue LED glow giving the place an almost futuristic feel. Cables ran neatly along the desks, feeding into high-performance servers stacked against the far wall. Several laptops, tablets, and external drives were scattered across the workspace. It was exactly what he had envisioned. Cara clapped her hands together. All right, let's get to it. You wanna know where we stand? Lemme show you. He had come because he wanted an in-depth update on what she'd been doing so far in setting up the internet and other digital aspects of his company. She walked over to her desk, tapped a few keys, and it displayed the infrastructure she had built so far. IT infrastructure was what she started with. Kara pointed at a cluster of interconnected nodes on the display. I've set up secure servers and cloud storage, military-grade encryption, no nonsense. Cold and hot wallets for crypto storage are fully operational, with a backup redundancy plan in place. I've also begun integration with existing investment platforms, but if you want to build our own, that's gonna take more manpower. Darren folded his arms, nodding. Good. We'll weigh the costs of building versus integrating. What about security? Kara smiled. Always worried about your privacy, aren't you, Mr. D? She tapped another section. I think I outdid myself here. Firewalls, AI-driven threat detection, and multi-factor authentication are all set. I ran penetration tests, no major vulnerabilities, but I'm gonna keep stress testing it. Also, I drafted a risk monitoring protocol to flag suspicious transactions. If someone tries to pull a fast one, we'll know before they do. Darren liked that. He gave her an impressed look, especially after the system affirmed her job. What about regulations? She scoffed. Yeah, I know, SEC, KYC, AML, all that fun stuff. I've set up compliance protocols and hired a legal consultant to make sure we don't get smacked with a lawsuit before we even launch. You're welcome. He gave her a small nod. Keep it airtight. She pressed enter and arrived at a new section. If we wanna offer DeFi services, I'm gonna need to bring in some blockchain engineers. Right now, I've set up a basic framework and pulled in some audits for smart contract security. No holes so far, but I'm not gonna let this turn into a Web3 horror story. You want reliability, I'll give you reliability. Darren appreciated her foresight. Good. I don't want this company's foundation cracking before it even stands. Yes sir, she replied. Her eyes gleamed as she switched to another screen. Now, this is the fun part. I've implemented computer-driven market analysis tools, machine learning models that track price movements, whale transactions, and overall sentiment. We can predict trends before most traders even notice them. I also coded an internal dashboard for real-time investment tracking. Darren let out a low hum. You're saying we'll have an edge over competitors? Kara grinned. I'm saying we'll be playing chess while they're still learning checkers. I can't believe you were able to do all of this in a week. I'm not done yet, Mr. D. Don't get all excited. She cracked her knuckles. This part is the website's in development. It's gonna be sleek, professional, and secure. UI/UX is being handled by a contractor I trust. Also, KYC/AML systems are already built into the onboarding process. And you haven't given me a company name. I'll tell you a name soon. Meanwhile, make sure the verification process isn't a headache, Darren said. If it's too much, people won't bother. Don't worry, I'm not a sadist, she shot back. It'll be smooth, efficient, and idiot-proof. Kara leaned back against her desk. We're gonna need more people. Developers, engineers, cybersecurity analysts. I've started scouting, but I'll need a bigger budget to get top-tier talent. Darren exhaled through his nose. How big of a budget? She looked at him and raised a knowing brow. Darren sighed. I see. I'll get it to you soon. We need the best. No compromises. Love to hear that, Mr. D. I'm not going to lie. You've got me excited with this whole building a company thing. Never knew I could use my talents like this. Darren smiled to himself. He was right. I've implemented encrypted messaging tools for internal communications, she continued. No unprotected emails, no leaks. Also, disaster recovery plans are in place in case of an emergency. If someone tries to take us down, we'll bounce back in no time. Darren was silent for a moment, absorbing everything. Kara had covered every angle. You've done well, he finally said. Kara's lips twitched. Yeah, I know. Why don't we go over to my bedroom and you can thank me appropriately? She rested a leg on his lap. Darren shot her a look, but she just grinned naughtily. I have to be somewhere, Kara. But we'll continue this when I get back. Then, she crossed her arms and tilted her head. Well, hold on. It's now your turn. How's everything else going? Hiring. Darren adjusted his cuffs. I've gotten a secretary. Kara raised an eyebrow. Oh? Who? You'll see her later, he replied coolly. I also want you to visit the site soon. It's secured, but you should assess it for IT installations. Kara smirked. I like when you tell me what to do. Darren glanced at his watch. I have to go see my mother. Kara saluted. Go on, then. I'll keep building our digital empire. He didn't respond, just turned and left. The system dinged in his mind. Progress update, IT infrastructure established equals 70% by the time he arrived at Holloway Medical. It was already noon. The building stood tall against the afternoon sky, its glass facade reflecting the golden sunlight. The silver lettering above the entrance gleamed in the light, Holloway Medicals, a symbol of both healing and exclusivity. Well-dressed professionals walked in and out, their faces weary but composed. Patients were wheeled across the well-manicured front garden, where the scent of fresh lavender mixed with the sterility of hospital-grade disinfectant. Darren stepped out of his Aston Martin, the deep rumble of its engine cutting off as he shut the door behind him. He held a large bouquet in his hand, full of roses, tulips, and lilies arranged meticulously, while the neatly wrapped box of cookies in his other hand gave a homely touch to his otherwise sharp and professional look. He adjusted his cuffs, exhaled, and started toward the hospital's entrance, his polished shoes clicking rhythmically against the pavement alongside the sounds of life around him. Suddenly appearing in view, from the side of the street, was Rico Evans. He seemed to have been waiting. Leaning against a lamp-post, smoking a cigarette. He was dressed in dark casual clothing, a beanie pulled low over his short-cropped hair. Rico watched Darren closely, his posture relaxed but his gaze sharp. His eyes followed every movement the unsuspecting Darren made as he walked into the hospital. Rico's silent eyes narrowed, his palms clenched. Then, as Darren disappeared through the sliding doors, his gaze flicked to the Aston Martin parked by the curb. The sleek, expensive machine gleamed under the sunlight. A car like that didn't come cheap. Rico squinted, tilting his head, a mix of confusion and intrigue shadowing his face. He waited. 2 hours later, the sun had dipped lower, casting warm hues across the hospital parking lot. The traffic had thickened, the occasional honk and chatter of people filling the air. Rico had waited patiently through these 2 hours, shifting positions every so often, blending into the background like a ghost. Then, finally, the automatic doors slid open. Darren emerged, his hands now empty. The bouquet was gone. The cookies, too. His face was unreadable, though calmer, almost happier, like the sight of someone had refreshed him. Or some good news had brightened his day. Rico returned to the lamp-post, blending with its black color. Then he watched. Darren moved towards his car, pulling out his key fob. The Aston Martin beeped in response. Then, just as his hand reached for the door handle, something in the window's reflection made his heart jolt. A shadow. A figure. He spun around instantly, clenching his fist to prepare himself for an attack. But then he paused. Rico stood there. For a split second, neither moved. What the hell? Darren's thoughts spoke. What is Rico doing here right now? Rico's expression quickly shifted to one of surprise, eyebrows raised, lips parting slightly as if he hadn't expected this at all. Yo. No way, is that you, Darren? Rico's voice was laced with disbelief, a slow grin forming. Darren, still catching his breath, exhaled sharply, his muscles unclenching. He blinked before shaking his head, letting out a half laugh. Shit, Rico. He ran a hand through his hair, forcing himself to relax. What the hell, man? Rico chuckled, taking a step closer. Damn, bro, I didn't even recognize you at first. You look different. Sharper. Richer. His eyes flicked to the car behind Darren before settling back on him. You a millionaire or something now? Darren smirked. Something like that. Rico whistled, shaking his head. Damn. College must have treated you nicer than I thought, huh? Darren shrugged. I mean, that's not all of it, but I guess. I thought we were going to meet in my house. Yeah. I thought so too. But I just ran into here, and look at that. Awesome coincidence, don't you think? Ding. This person is being dishonest to you. Darren's gaze darkened as he studied him for a second longer, then chuckled. Yeah. We have to catch up properly, right? How about we hit that bar nearby? You know, reminisce about the old days. Rico appeared ecstatic with the idea. Yeah, man. Sounds good. Great. The bar was a familiar place. Dim lighting, old wooden furniture, a jukebox playing blues in the corner. It smelled like whiskey, cigars, and nostalgia. They found a booth near the back, away from the noise. Rico ordered a beer, Darren went with whiskey. To old times, Rico said, raising his bottle. Darren clinked his glass against it. To old times. The conversation started light, memories of college life, late-night cramming sessions, stupid pranks they'd pulled on professors. Even though Darren knew his old friend was being devious at best, he found himself easing into the flow, laughing as Rico reminded him of the time they nearly got suspended for hacking the school's grading system, an incident Darren had barely avoided getting blamed for. So, really, man, Rico leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. How'd you pull it off? The car, the suit. You got money, now huh? What's the secret? Ding. This character is maliciously curious of you. Darren gave a practiced chuckle, swirling the whiskey in his glass. I got lucky. Made a good investment at the right time. Rico raised an eyebrow. Stocks. Something like that. Darren kept his tone casual, but he was watching. Observing. You're being too cryptic, man. I'm not digging it. Come on. Help me out here. I need to make some investments too. Anything to get me out of the dregs here. Rico took a sip of his beer. And I've not forgotten. You were always into crypto back in the day. Remember? Used to go berserk about it? He let the words settle before adding, still into it? Darren's grip on his glass tightened slightly. Not as much, he lied smoothly. Market's unpredictable. I dabble here and there, but nothing crazy. Rico tilted his head. Huh. That's surprising. Darren raised an eyebrow. Why? Because I figured you'd be all over what's happening right now. Rico leaned back, arms stretched across the booth. There's this insane dude called Fugly Duckling. You haven't heard about him, have you? Surely you must have. There it was. Darren didn't react immediately. Instead, he took a slow sip of his drink, setting the glass down carefully. Can't say I have. Some new influencer. Rico laughed. Man, you really been out of the loop, huh? Dude's making waves? Insane returns, crazy buys real mysterious guy, too. He watched Darren closely. No one knows who he is. Darren met Rico's gaze, his expression unreadable. Sounds interesting. Silence hung between them for a beat too long. Then Darren leaned forward slightly, eyes sharp. But, Rico. This, coincidence. It's just way too aligned for a coincidence, right? Rico chuckled nervously. I know, right? Maybe God just wanted us to reunite as soon as possible. Darren took a sip of his whiskey and placed the glass dome gently. You haven't yet told me. What were you doing at the hospital? The question came out smoothly, but certainly caught Rico off guard. Rico Evans didn't flinch. Not at first. Darren had seen him bluff through poker games with a straight face and con his way out of situations that would have had anyone else folding under pressure. Throughout their college life, Rico had been great at doing anything that was morally questionable, but it was always easy for Darren to tell when he was lying. That was because he was way too good at it. Too good for his own good. The question, what were you doing in the hospital? Hung in the air like a tripwire. Darren watched carefully as Rico's pupils shifted, his shoulders tightening just a little before he relaxed into an easy smirk. A fraction of hesitation. Barely noticeable. Now here comes the lie. Oh, that. Rico let out a breathy chuckle, scratching the back of his neck. My aunt's been sick, man. Real bad. Some kind of kidney thing, I dunno, medical stuff's not my forte. Just came to drop off some things and check in on her. What about you, why are you here? Darren nodded slowly, taking a sip from his drink as he watched Rico over the rim of the glass. Ding. This person is lying to you. Oh, in my case, it's my mom, Darren said, exhaling as if he bought Rico's excuse. Oh, man. What happened? She has an aortic disease. She just had surgery and things are looking really good. Damn, Steele, Rico leaned on the table, adjusting his beanie. Wish her a safe recovery, really. Thanks, Darren smiled warmly. Maybe we could go see her now if you'd like. And then we can also go see that aunt of yours. Rico sat back, eyes showing his worry. Ah. He waved it off. Don't worry. It'll get me all emotional seeing either of them that way. I know I don't see my aunt like that for a second time today. Maybe another day. Darren almost smirked. But he nodded. Maybe another day. Rico's gaze held for a second longer than necessary, like he was trying to dissect Darren's words, peel them apart and find something hidden between the syllables. But Darren played it cool. He just swirled his drink idly, resting his forearm on the table, completely at ease. Or at least, that's what he wanted Rico to see. And then, as if it was just casual conversation, Rico leaned in slightly. But man, it is wild seeing you again. You've changed a lot. You must be rolling in it now, an Aston Martin really. Darren wished he didn't have to bring this up again. Life's not exactly as it seems. You said something about a fugly duckling guy? A crypto investor? Yeah. Rico's eyes narrowed on him, gaze not as scheming as his thoughts. Bloody maniac that one. I did mention the kinds of transactions he's doing. All of them have broken records so far. Darren pursed his lips with little interest. Sounds like you've been keeping tabs on him. Yeah, well, gotta stay updated, right? Rico said smoothly, but Darren could hear the layer underneath. He's fishing. And now, Darren was certain of it. He sat back, still relaxed on the outside, but inside, his mind was racing. Something was happening here. Rico had called him just days after his system had warned him about another hacking attempt on his Bitcoin wallet. At the time, Darren had brushed it off as the usual cyber thieves trying their luck. But now? Now it wasn't just random attacks. Rico had asked him if he still lived on Male Green Street. Darren had said yes. The next day, his house was broken into. His laptop had been tampered with. Someone had tried to breach his system. He had thought it was Brooklyn. It made sense, she had the motive. Every evidence and reason pointed to her. But Rico? Darren stole a glance at him, keeping his expression neutral as his thoughts churned. Rico was way too quick to bring up Fugly Duckling. And this coincidental running into each other, obviously wasn't coincidental at all. Rico, also another skilled hacker. But why? Why was he suddenly trying to pry? Did he know that Darren was Fugly Duckling? Or was it just suspicion and he was in search of evidence? Was he trying to steal and run away? Darren knew Rico. Stealing wasn't far off from his level. He decided to deploy the system's Personal Insight Protocol feature. Ding. Personal Insight Protocol is complete information on subject is as follows: full name, Rico Elias Evans, age, 24, occupation, cybersecurity specialist, independent contractor, affiliations, Moon Wealth Management Office's status, under surveillance by MWMO due to criminal hacking activities, condition, facing potential legal action unless identity of Fugly Duckling is discovered, address, 298 Hillgrid Street, Tail Drive, California, 80590, phone number, 303-5550907. Darren's pulse slowed, a cold realization settling in. Moon Wealth Management Offices. That was a subsidiary of Moon Enterprises which was run under the control of Ryan Anders, a sly businessman who candidly was very good at business management. They were trying to scout him early. Get his signature before he became public knowledge. Darren exhaled through his nose, forcing himself to stay in control. All right. So Rico suspects. But he doesn't know for sure. He's looking for evidence. That meant Darren still had the upper hand. Even though the system had told him to declare himself as an investor this month, he wanted to do it on his terms, not having it leaked by a wealth management company. Also, he wanted to tell people he cared about face to face, not have them find out through the news or with MWMO agencies following him around, asking for his signature. Man, this has been great, Darren said suddenly, finishing his drink and setting the glass down. But I gotta be somewhere. Got a meeting lined up. Rico blinked, momentarily caught off guard. Then he smiled, nodding. Yeah, no worries. I understand you're like a big man now, so it's fine. We should do this again, though. Maybe hit up the old crew. For sure. Darren slid back his chair, then gave Rico a small, knowing smile. Hey, my mom's gonna be out of the hospital soon. You should come over, say hi. She'd love to see you. He watched Rico carefully, catching the flicker of hesitation before the man nodded. Yeah. That'd be nice. Darren clapped a hand on his shoulder. See you around, Rick. He then walked out of the bar, sauntering with determination. He pulled out his phone and called a number. It rang 3 times before the call connected. You weren't the one who broke into my house, were you? Well, of course not, Mr. Steele. The playful voice of Brooklyn Baker carried an unmistakable smirk with it. I'm not a delinquent. She was walking with her feminine, hurried steps, hips and ass swaying with the motion of her feet as she walked towards a large building. Darren frowned, continuing toward his car, his mind sharp with calculation. But you did enter my house. Brooklyn's lips perked a bit, but she kept listening. You knocked. Saw the door was open, and you went in, maybe out of honest worry at first, Darren continued, keeping his tone level, though there was still an edge to it. But when you saw it was empty, you went in, did a little digging. You found the receipt. A soft chuckle crackled through the receiver. Wow. How impressive. I didn't know you were such a detective, Mr. Steele. Ever thought of being an investigative journalist? Darren wasn't amused. The least you could have done when you came to my house in Green Bay was tell me that you found my house open. And admit to trespassing. Brooklyn mused with brows raised. Doesn't sound very smart, does it? Are you admitting to it now? A pause. Then, teasingly, she replied, are you going to file charges against me if I did? Darren opened his car door, letting out a frustrated but tentative exhale. No. Brooklyn's smile widened, she even bit her lip involuntarily as she walked closer and closer towards the building. I know it's only happened twice, but something about hearing your voice over the phone just brightens up my day, Mr. Steele. Do call me, so we can do this again. The line clicked dead before Darren could respond. Brooklyn Baker lowered her phone, slipping it into her coat pocket. She looked up to the building she was approaching. It was a place she could basically call her second home at this point. The towering glass monolith of Everyday News. Everyday News carried the slogan, "The power of information in the subject of power." They indeed had that. Their headquarters was a tower skyscraper. It loomed over the city like a modern-day colossus, with its sleek steel frame and gleaming windows reflecting the morning sun. It was designed with grandeur in mind, standing as a symbol of journalistic power. It was one of the top 5 news organizations in the country and the most influential in the state. With the globe on top of the building, one would be reminded of the Daily Planet. Owned by Douglas Harrington, a media mogul with deep ties in both political and business spheres, Everyday News was a titan in the industry. Its reach extended far beyond newspapers and television broadcasts. It controlled public opinion, influenced policymakers, and dictated what stories lived or died. Each floor of the building catered to a different branch of the news empire: entertainment everyday, the latest on film, music, and celebrity culture. Fashion everyday, covering trends, designers, and industry scandals. Sports everyday, the heart of athletics, from college games to international championships. Politics everyday, the nerve center of governmental affairs and political movements. There were many more branches, but the floor Brooklyn called home, the kingdom where she reigned as the head journalist, was business everyday. She strode into the vast lobby, her heels clicking against the polished marble floors. The place was a flurry of activity. There were journalists rushing in and out, interns scrambling with files, camera crews setting up interviews. The humming energy of information in motion. Morning, Baker. Brooklyn, need a quote from you on that stock crash. You owe me coffee for yesterday's interview tip. Brooklyn nodded, offering the occasional smirk as she weaved through the chaos. She had a reputation here, sharp, relentless, and unshaken. But today, her focus was on one thing. She approached a glass-walled office at the end of the hall. Inside, a woman with meticulously styled blonde hair, rectangular glasses, and an air of constant urgency was signing off on contracts while speaking to 3 different people at once. Her name was Catherine Langley. She was the media manager for Brooklyn's branch. Brooklyn knocked once before stepping in. "Hello, Mrs. Langley." Langley barely looked up. "Make it quick, Baker." Brooklyn leaned against the desk, placing a file down. "So, I've compiled enough testimonies, secured statements, and confirmed sources. The Gareth Smithers expose is ready. We need to schedule a day for the big release." Langley didn't even glance at the file. She continued scribbling, flipping through documents, then, without raising her head, delivered the words like a guillotine drop. "The story's been buried." Brooklyn paused, then blinked. "What? We're not running it?" Another pause. Then she let out a short, incredulous laugh. "That's funny, Mrs. Langley. Come on, we both know this is going to blow up once it airs." It's not happening, Brooklyn." Brooklyn's amusement vanished. "You can't be serious. This is major." Right now, in my hands, I have proof. Testimonies. Signed statements. Victims who it came from higher up. Langley finally looked at her, dropping the pen in her hand. Funding is at stake. Brooklyn's jaw tightened. Funding. Langley's gaze was steady. Let's not kid ourselves, Brooklyn. We both knew this was going to happen. Gareth Smithers has powerful friends. Friends who have deep investments in this company. If we air this, we're looking at major financial withdrawal. Lawsuits. Boardroom battles. She sighed, closing a file. It's not worth the risk. Brooklyn clenched her fists. Did you not read the reports? Women were hurt. Young people were taken advantage of and left to suffer. You know that? Langley exhaled, rubbing her temple. I do. Then why are we letting this go? Langley studied her for a moment, then said something that made Brooklyn's stomach drop. You've gotten a little attached to this story, haven't you? Brooklyn's lips parted slightly. What? Langley leaned forward. It's not happening, Brooklyn. Barry at her experience grew stern. Have you forgotten? You're a journalist, Brooklyn. It's not our job to search for justice. We just deliver the news. Brooklyn stared at her, feeling those words pulling her down with its weight. Langley stood, gathering her files. I have meetings to attend. Take the rest of the day off. Then, she walked away, leaving Brooklyn standing there. Dumbfounded. Crestfallen. And furious. In this world, many had different beliefs of what was moral and what wasn't, but at some level, there are certain things people all generally agreed were vastly immoral. Brooklyn didn't need to be told that this was one of them. After being admonished by the media manager, she sat in her office, her fingers pressing against her temples, eyes staring blankly at the wooden desk that had been hers for years. Brooklyn loved coffee, yet the steaming cup sat untouched beside her laptop, its aroma mixing with the faint scent of old books and printer ink. Papers were scattered in front of her, but she wasn't seeing them. Her thoughts swirled like a storm, crashing violently against the walls of reason. How could she just let this go? She understood how politics worked. She had even played the game herself, spinning narratives, omitting inconvenient truths when necessary. The government manipulating the media wasn't new to her, hell, she had facilitated it at times. But this was different. This was a cover-up. This was burying a story that truly mattered. Brooklyn exhaled sharply, her nails digging into her palms. Do you even care about any of this? You're a heartless woman. Sandy Myers's words resurfaced in her mind, the accusation ringing louder than ever. Brooklyn had no way to prove it, but she could tell that Sandy herself was a victim of Gareth Smithers's woeful actions. There was no way a woman like her would have stayed that long and not experienced anything. Their conversation hurt as she thought about it. Brooklyn had mastered the act of accepting being disliked. It came with the profession. She had never had a problem with walking the tightrope between ethical and questionable. In this field, the truth was rarely black and white. But this was crossing the line. And she didn't want Sandy Myers, a victim, to think that she was a completely heartless woman. Especially in this situation. Journalists weren't law enforcement, weren't judges, or executioners. They didn't bring justice. But they sure as hell made sure the truth was known so that justice could be brought. And if they weren't doing that, if they were suppressing the truth, then weren't they just as guilty? A knock on her door. Brooklyn looked up as a junior assistant stepped in, placing a thick folder on her desk. From Langley, the assistant said. She wants you working on this next. Brooklyn pulled the folder toward her, flipping it open. Her stomach twisted. Bitcoin's alleged collapse, why cryptocurrency is a failing investment. Her jaw clenched. More bullshit. Another manufactured hit piece meant to instill fear, to manipulate public perception. She flipped through the pages, scanning the data, the carefully curated language meant to overstate a minor dip in Bitcoin's value, painting it as catastrophic. As if that was more important than exposing a man who had ruined lives. Brooklyn slammed the folder shut, pushing away from her desk so violently her chair scraped across the floor. No. No, she wasn't doing this. She grabbed the real story, the Gareth Smithers exposé, and stormed out of her office. Everyone paused, watching her storm past then, all having an idea of what was about to happen. Brooklyn stormed into Catherine Langley's office, refusing to knock. The media manager was seated at her desk, glasses perched on her nose, scribbling on a contract. As though she was expecting the outburst, she didn't even look up. Brooklyn slammed the exposé onto Langley's desk. "I can't let it go, Mrs. Langley. We need to run this." Langley sighed, setting her pen down with deliberate slowness. She glanced at the folder, then at Brooklyn, unimpressed. "We've already discussed this." "No, you've dismissed it?" Brooklyn's voice was tight, controlled rage simmering beneath. "And I need you to look at this again. Actually look at what's in front of you." Langley exhaled sharply but opened the folder. Brooklyn's eyes burned as she watched her boss skim the pages, pages filled with evidence, testimonies, lives shattered. Neil Grayson. 22, Brooklyn read out with a cutting tone. Came to work for Smithers right after college. He had the next big startup idea, a social networking platform for professionals. Smithers took him under his wing, promised mentorship. Instead, he stole Neil's work, claimed it as his own. Neil was blacklisted. No one in the industry would touch him after that. Langley stayed silent and expressionless. Sarah Keene. 24. She interned at Smithers' firm. He cornered her in his office. When she refused his advances, he tanked her career before it even started. She's working at a coffee shop now, Catherine. With a degree from Stanford. Brooklyn's voice rose. Do you know how many women didn't fight back? How many just let it happen because they knew no one would believe them? Langley's lips pressed into a thin line. Brooklyn, this is a pattern. A cycle. And we're letting it continue. Brooklyn's heart pounded. I know what's happening here. I understand who's pulling the strings. But that doesn't change the fact that this is our job. Langley closed the folder. It's not happening. Brooklyn's eyes made her appear insane. Maddened with anger and frustration. You can't be serious. Langley leaned forward, folding her hands together. Brooklyn, listen to me. This isn't about right or wrong. This is about business. Do you know what the Morrisons will do to us if we run this? These investors with deep pockets don't want this story out. If we push it, if we defy them, funding gets pulled. We'll crumble and then we can never bring any story to light once again. Is that what you want? What does it matter when they're the ones who get to choose what stories we report? Langley looked at Brooklyn, shook her head and sighed. Then she returned to her work. Brooklyn's blood boiled. So that's it? Money over truth. It's always money over truth, Brooklyn. Langley's tone was final. Brooklyn stared at her, disgusted. And you're okay with that? Langley sighed, rubbing her temples. I don't have a choice. Brooklyn's hands curled into fists. Then she unfurled them. Took a deep breath. Then give me one. Langley's brow furrowed. Brooklyn straightened, unshaken. Authorize the release of the exposé. She paused. Or fire me. Langley blinked. Excuse me. You heard me. Brooklyn's voice was ice. Either you let me do my job, or you let me go. Your choice. Silence. Langley studied her for a long moment. Then, she laughed. It was quiet. Amused. Pitying. I was once like you, Brooklyn, Langley said, shaking her head. Excited. Driven. Fired up with my vain belief of what's right and wrong. This is business, Brooklyn. It's the world of capitalism we built. She sighed. I had hoped you'll learn and adjust. But it seems you prefer to do that the hard way. She gave Brooklyn a dark gaze. Do you really think this company needs you? The words hit hard, but Brooklyn didn't flinch. Silence stretched for multiple seconds, then Langley exhaled, pushing the exposé back toward Brooklyn. You're fired. Brooklyn stilled. A second passed. Then another. She had gambled, and she had lost. Slowly, she reached for the folder, gripping it tightly as if it could anchor her. She swallowed hard, the weight of reality settling in. Then, she straightened. With every ounce of dignity she had, Brooklyn turned and walked out of the office. The open newsroom was silent. The reporters, editors, interns had all heard what had happened. They watched her leave. Brooklyn kept her chin high, ignoring the stunned and pitying gazes. Was Brooklyn really leaving business every day? She walked past the desk that had been hers for years. Past the walls that had once held her work, her legacy. And then, she arrived outside. The city stretched before her, vast and indifferent. Brooklyn exhaled, the cold air purifying her lungs from the suffocating atmosphere back in the office. She turned back and gazed at the tall building. She'd lived a great deal of her adult life in the walls of this glass tower. Now she'd been fired, she only had one question for herself. Who was Brooklyn Baker without business every day? Not very far from where she was, Darren's car had just parked expertly into a space in a parking lot. Turning it off, he leaned against the sleek black hood of the car, arms crossed as he watched Rachel fix the collar of her fitted blazer. She adjusted the cuffs next, her expression set with quiet determination. I really wished you had listened to me. I enjoyed your presence the last time, Darren muttered, exhaling as he checked his watch. But I can handle registering a company myself. Rachel gave him a look of admiration and respect. You have acquired my service, Mr. Steele, she said. I want to make sure that you receive it to its full extent. Her eyes glistened as they grew more intense, gazing at him. I am your secretary. This is what secretaries do. I wouldn't be doing my job if I let you. Darren sighed, shaking his head. This wasn't the first try. He had tried at least 3 times before, but Rachel had been relentless. She wanted to prove herself. Again. Not just as his secretary but as someone he could rely on, someone who ensured his business ran smoothly. Her drive to satisfy him, to make things work for him, was something he couldn't argue with. Ringing. He took out his phone. Seeing the caller, he cancelled it and slid it back into his pocket. Let's go then. They both stepped down from the ride, Darren in a pure black suit with a red tie, and Rachel with a red fitted gown and high black heels. The building they were walking into was the Los Alvarez Secretary of State office. Beginning phase 1 of company creation, Darren wasn't following the phasing sequentially. He didn't need to. When an opportunity came by to complete an aspect of building the company, he took it quickly. Just like hiring Kara and Rachel when job hirings were all the way in phase 3. But at this point, phase 1 was what he needed to get done to move to the more serious parts of building a company. Phase 1 was foundation and planning. The Los Alvarez Secretary of State office was housed in a sleek, modern government building downtown. Entering inside, a large, marble lobby greeted visitors. Its high ceiling and pristine floors gave off the air of bureaucratic authority. Unsurprisingly, rows of service counters stretched across the main hall, where people sat filling out forms or waiting for their numbers to be called. You were almost too relaxed about this, Rachel told him. This should have been one of the first things you did, but I guess being non-conventional has been your style. I'm also glad I came along just in time, that way I can make sure it goes as smoothly as you need. Darren hid his smile. If this went on, Rachel was going to make him lazy. As they approached the front desk, a receptionist greeted them with a professional smile. "How can I assist you?" Rachel, standing beside Darren, didn't hesitate. "We're here to register a limited liability company under the state of California laws." The receptionist nodded, sliding a clipboard across the counter. "You'll need to fill out an articles of organization form. Is it just the two of you handling this?" Rachel answered before Darren could. "Yes. He's the owner. I'm here to make sure everything is done properly." Her tone was crisp, professional, and of course, just daring anyone to try argue with her. They were directed to a waiting area, where Darren leaned back in his chair, watching Rachel work. She filled out the form with practiced ease, her handwriting sharp and deliberate. "Yup. She's certainly going to make me lazy." "Are you always this efficient?" he asked her. Rachel shot him a look. "I want everything done perfectly for you, sir." Darren smirked but said nothing. "Sir," he thought. "I like that." His phone buzzed again. He took it out, checked the ID Brooklyn Baker. He exhaled sharply and ignored the call. Rachel noticed. "That's the fourth time. You really don't want to deal with whoever that is, huh?" "Not right now." Rachel didn't push. Instead, she stood and returned the completed form to the counter. Within minutes, they were called to a desk, where a woman in a navy blue suit glanced over their paperwork. "All right," the woman said, adjusting her glasses. "I see you're filing as an LLC. You'll need a registered agent, someone or preferably a corporation who can receive legal documents on behalf of the company." Rachel glanced at Darren, who appeared disconnected. When he noticed her looking at him, he gave her an eyebrow raise that said, "Didn't you want to do everything yourself?" Rachel turned around and said, "We don't have one yet, but we do have some corporations in mind. You have a month to get one. There are some popular ones like Moon Wealth Management Offices, the Segumoto Offices or Penn Wealth. Do get one in time." Rachel nodded. "We'll do just that." Darren's gaze darkened at the thought of Moon Wealth Management Offices. They were already looking for him, weren't they? Wanting his signature. But, they were a subsidiary of Moon Enterprises. And Darren would never work for them, not even for the cliché idea of breaking them down from the inside like some corporate saboteur. When he came for them, he wanted them to know it was him. The woman typed something into the system. "Let's move on. Please, what's the name of the company and what operations will it be running?" Darren answered this time, leaning forward. "Steele Investments," his firm voice said. Rachel looked at him with a slight smile of admiration, then she answered the rest of the question. "A multi-asset investment company strategically allocating capital across a spectrum of investment opportunities, encompassing established sectors such as real estate and equities, alongside emerging digital asset markets, including cryptocurrency." Impressed, the woman nodded, inputting the information. "Do you have an operating agreement drafted?" Rachel was already pulling a document from her bag. "We do." The woman blinked, clearly surprised at how prepared she was. Darren shrugged. "Nice," the woman murmured, skimming through the file. Her eyes flicked to Darren, lingering a little too long. "Very efficient. It's good to have a sharp secretary like this." Rachel's expression didn't change, but Darren noticed the sudden coldness in her posture. "Yes," Rachel said flatly. "Now, what's next?" The woman cleared her throat, flustered. "Right, you'll need an employer identification number, EIN, for tax purposes. Hold this document, let's get that done quickly." Darren accepted the documents she handed him, his eyes drifting over the paperwork. Rachel took it from him, earning an eyebrow raise from him. She pursed her lips at him, making it clear that she didn't want him working when she's around. That's what a secretary is for. And she did the reading herself. An hour later, they were done with the IN and it seemed their job was done. Darren tapped the desk impatiently. "We're done here, then." The woman smiled at Darren. "Yes, unless you need help with anything else." Rachel caught that look in her eyes and instantly narrowed hers. "We don't," she said with a razor-sharp voice. The woman took her smile away. "Okay." Darren glanced at the two of them, then got up from his seat with a sigh. He wasn't blind. Rachel had been watching the woman like a hawk ever since she started flirting with him. Was it also a secretary's job to be jealous? As they walked out, she handed him the paperwork, still looking mildly annoyed. "You should have let me handle that part too," she muttered. Darren chuckled once. "What part?" Rachel didn't answer, cheeks reddening. They were just stepping into the lobby when two businessmen in suits crossed their path. Their eyes landed on Rachel, and one of them immediately brightened. "Hey there, miss," one of them said, approaching her friendly. "If you don't mind, now that I've ran into you, I would like to book an appointment with your boss." Rachel frowned. So did Darren. "My boss," she repeated. The man hesitated, confused. "I'm sorry. Aren't you Gareth Smithers' secretary?" Rachel's eyes instantly widened with fear. Her breath caught in her throat and her heart pounded against her ribs. It was like in that second, she could see herself being dragged into the abyss, into the life she once had under Gareth Smithers. The life Darren had saved her from. Rachel turned to Darren, her silver blue eyes wide with fear and confusion. She had only wanted to work for him. To make sure everything was done right. She hadn't thought this would happen. Hadn't thought she'd be recognized. She should have listened to him. Darren saw the look she gave him. It was apologetic, almost pleading. As if she was bracing for his disappointment. He didn't give her that. He wasn't disappointed with her. Instead, his gaze sharpened as he turned back to the men in suits. The businessman still looked confused, glancing between Darren and Rachel to figure out what was happening. Rachel swallowed hard, straightening her shoulders and speaking with her formal voice of ice. "I'm sorry, you must have me confused with someone else," she said, voice carefully even. "I'm not Gareth Smithers' secretary." The man frowned. He looked at his companion, who also seemed uncertain. "Are you sure?" "I'm almost very certain that you are." Before he could continue, Darren stepped in, his expression darkening like a storm rolling in. "Hey," he cut in, voice low, edged with warning. "Didn't you hear her? She's not the person you think she is. Now get out of our way." For a moment, the men hesitated. They looked at him with questions in their eyes. Who was this guy? To them, Darren was a young man, not older than 22, but there was something about the way he spoke. Like some powerful people, his presence came with an aura, one that made them pause. His confidence, his command. There was authority inside of it, that certainly shouldn't belong to someone his age. Whoever this guy was, the two certainly didn't want to get on his bad side. "Ah, yes," one of them finally muttered, clearing his throat. "I apologize." The other nodded stiffly, and just like that, they stepped aside. Ignoring them, Darren's hand brushed Rachel's arm lightly, then grabbed her palm reassuringly, before turning. "Let's go," he said. Rachel followed him without a word, still shaken, still processing. As they left the state office, she glanced back at the men, seeing them watching them leave with curiosity and confusion in their expressions. Rachel lowered her head worriedly and simply followed after Darren. She only spoke when they were inside the car, away from prying eyes. Silence first, for a while. Darren was glaring into the office like he could see through. He must be angry, Rachel thought. "I'm sorry," she said softly. I should have listened to you about coming here. Darren sighed as he gripped the steering wheel, but his tone was steady, calm. You have nothing to be sorry about. Her brows jumped up. It's fine, he continued. I can't be angry with you for doing what benefits me. You put yourself in jeopardy just to make sure things went smoothly for me. I'd be unfair to hold that against you. Rachel exhaled shakily, some of the tension leaving her shoulders. Her gaze danced around his face as she thought. How much nicer can he be? But Darren's eyes darkened again as he looked at the Secretary of State through the car's front window. But those men, he said, voice clipped. They'll get a hold of Gareth Smithers soon enough. And they'll tell him they saw you with me. Darren almost grunted. I have to think of something fast. Rachel swallowed, her eyes fixed even deeper on him. Every second that passed, it became clearer that she could trust this man. She'd only wished she'd summoned the courage to talk to him back when they worked together. She could have used a friend. And she had a feeling that he would have as well. Whatever the case, now, her fear had shifted into something else. Trust. Somehow she knew he would figure it out. Like he always has. He would take care of her and she would take care of his business. That is why it was so important for her to do things like this. It was the only real way she could pay him back for what he was doing for her. Her eyes lowered down his neck. Unless, would he want? Her cheeks reddened. No. She shook her head, pressing the hem of her gown. What was she even thinking? That's inappropriate. Silent now, she stole another glance at him and saw him click into action, starting the car and driving out of the lot. The drive was mostly quiet, not necessarily tense. Rachel didn't know where they were going until the scenery changed, shifting from the city's organized chaos to a more private, exclusive district. Large estates lined the streets, their driveways long, their entrances grand. She recognized this place as Green Baby, one of the most expensive private/government-owned streets in the state reserved for the wealthy. Did Darren live here? As though answering her question, Darren pulled into his own property. Rachel was stunned. It was a sprawling mansion, elegant in its structure, and that beautiful, pristine fountain at the front. Even the pathway leading up to the house looked like it belonged in a magazine. And that car? There was someone beside it? A woman? Darren had seen the woman too. His entire body seemed to tense at the sight of her and her car parked by the fountain. Who's that? Rachel asked, still distracted by the mansion. Wait. I know her. Darren didn't reply. He pushed open his door, moving quickly. Rachel reached for her own door, but before she could touch the handle, Darren was already there, opening it for her. His eyes flicked toward the woman waiting by the fountain, sharp with irritation. Rachel got out but hesitated. Go inside, Darren told her firmly. Wait for me. She glanced toward the woman, who smiled at her smug, amused. Then she lifted a hand, wiggling her fingers in a lazy wave. Rachel didn't respond. She turned and walked toward the house, doing exactly as Darren told her. Darren, on the other hand, stomped toward Brooklyn, his patience already running thin. She watched him approach, arms crossed, eyes dancing with mischief. Is that who I think it is? She mused. Mr. Steele, you impress me by the moment. Once he stood feet to feet with her, Darren went at it, not wasting time with pleasantries. What the hell is wrong with you? Brooklyn raised a brow. This is the second time you've trespassed on my property. Third time rather. You're a journalist, not a private investigator. You can't keep sneaking onto a private street just because you have an overinflated sense of entitlement. She smirked. But this time, her pretense wasn't perfect. The hurt in her eyes showed slightly. Darren didn't care. You harass people for a living, he continued, tone biting. You dig into their lives, spin stories for your own amusement, and have the audacity to call it journalism. He scoffed. I don't know what's more pathetic, your relentless need to stick your nose where it doesn't belong, or the fact that you actually believe you're some kind of righteous truth seeker. Brooklyn's smirk faltered, but Darren wasn't done. And don't even get me started on business every day. If I had $1 for every sensationalist, half-baked headline your studio pushed out, I'd be richer than I already am. But I guess that's what happens when you sell out integrity for views, huh? Brooklyn's jaw tightened. Darren shook his head. I don't have time for whatever nonsense you came here for, so why don't you turn around, get back in your car, and go find another scandal to exploit? Silence stretched between them. Brooklyn threw her face down like she was holding back emotions, lips pressed thinly. Then she lifted her head and said, I left. Darren's brows creased. What? Brooklyn crossed her arms again, but there was something different in her stance now. It was less smug, more restrained. I left business every day. I don't work there anymore. Darren stared at her. What? There were many kinds of news one would expect, but they were usually under the realm of possibility. What's possible? Brooklyn Baker leaving business every day certainly wasn't possible. She was the top host and journalist for that media for many years. All the 10 years that were to come. And now they've separated? That singular act of resigning from Garrett's company, how many new events is it going to cause? Once again, he was messing with the timeline. Trying to figure it all out, Darren blinked, his frown deepening. His thoughts continued to stall for a moment before he finally said, You left business every day. Brooklyn exhaled, crossing her arms. Yeah. Well, technically they fired me. But yes. Fired you. His voice was skeptical, laced with disbelief. You're their best reporter. One of the best in the state. She let out a dry chuckle, shaking her head. Well, I'm glad you think that about me, Mr. Steele. But like my media manager said, I overestimated my power in the company. Darren's eyes narrowed. She was being serious. Why did they fire you? He asked. Tried to do the right thing for a change, she sighed, looking down. Look at where that got me. Darren gave her an eyebrow raise, making it clear that that answer wasn't sufficient. Brooklyn looked up at him, then away. They're burying the story? I came to work yesterday, ready to report one of the biggest stories of my career, but I was stopped at every turn. You know me, Steele, I don't take kindly to people telling me to sit down and shut up. Not when I know a story has to come out. And besides, Garrett's victims deserve justice. Darren watched her closely, gauging her expression. This time, unlike her usual, there was no performance in her tone, no exaggeration. She was telling the truth. So I used what I thought was my trump card. I put my job on the line, she continued. I went to my media manager and told her to either fire me or let me do what I needed to do. A small smirk ghosted her lips. Guess which one they picked? Darren's thoughts churned in his mind. Was this for real? Brooklyn Baker, walking away from a top news studio. That was unexpected. He had always assumed she only cared about the win, breaking the story first, getting the biggest audience, solidifying her name as one of the most relentless reporters out there. And to her credit, she had. In the former timeline, Brooklyn had become a pillar of news and business. Everything she said was seen as gospel, especially in the business world. He wondered if she would still reach those heights now she didn't have the everyday news backing. But even more surprising, he had never thought she actually cared about the people caught in the mess of her headlines. I thought you didn't care about that, he muttered. Brooklyn's gaze flickered with something unreadable before she shrugged. Turns out I do. Darren tilted his head slightly, studying her. He wasn't sure whether to believe she was truly changing or if this was just another move. Brooklyn noticed the look and immediately scowled. Hey, don't start thinking I've gone soft or anything. I'm just doing what I think is right in this situation. Darren didn't respond, just stared at her for a second before she sighed and moved on. Anyway, she said, shifting her stance, I'm going independent. No more answering to a studio. My name's got enough weight to pull its own audience. At least I think so. Darren folded his arms. If she was that invasive when she had the rules of a company holding her back, how much worse was she going to be now that she was completely unrestrained? He also had another question. Why are you telling me all of this? He asked, his voice as cool as smoke. Why call me a dozen times just to say you're quitting your job? Brooklyn immediately turned red, her lips parting before she clamped them shut. Her eyes darted away, and she brought down her hands like a child throwing a tantrum. What? I wanted you to know. Darren narrowed his gaze. Brooklyn turned even redder. She couldn't bring herself to say it, that for some reason, his words before, when they had first spoken, had actually stung her. She'd been insulted before. She'd been called worse things by people she exposed. But somehow, when he said it, when he said he disliked her and other journalists, it had felt different. She quickly cleared her throat. As I was saying, to get started, I need to feature some of my stories somewhere first. A magazine, something with reach, before I can build my own platform fully. Darren lifted a thinking brow. A magazine, huh? His mind flickered to Sophie. I think I can help with that. Then he added firmly, but that's all you'll be getting from me. Brooklyn smiled weakly at his face, shaking her head. Fair, she said, an amused yet knowing glint in her eyes. Thinking about it? I probably owe you more than you owe me. But I'll make it up to you. Darren wasn't sure he wanted to know what she meant by that. She smiled brighter now, then gave him a lazy salute. See you around, Steele. With that, she turned, got into her car, and drove off. Darren watched the tail lights disappear before he exhaled, rubbing his temple. What a damn headache that woman is. Shaking his head, he finally turned back toward his house, stepping inside. Rachel stood in the middle of the grand living space, her arms folded, one leg crossed over the other as she took in the sight around her. The awe in her expression was subtle, but he could see it. She was admiring his home. She looked almost small standing there, but something about the way she held herself kept her from being swallowed by it. At the sound of his footsteps, she turned to him. Darren noticed something in her eyes once she looked at him. It was an apology, guilt for not listening to him about coming along today. Hey, she said softly. Darren let out a slow breath. Hey. Even with the slight sense of security his presence provided, Darren could still see it in her eyes, the fear, the unease clinging to her like a shadow. Rachel was a type of woman who lived her life on composure. Darren knew that much about her. He saw this in real time too. She was desperately trying to compose herself, to pretend like the encounter at the state office hadn't rattled her. Unlike usual, she wasn't being very good at it today. The look on her face right now. Darren had seen that look before. The kind that came from knowing your life had suddenly shifted into dangerous territory. He moved toward the kitchen, saying nothing at first after the hay as he took out a bottle of whiskey from the cabinet. You're still terrified, he said, not as an accusation, just a fact. Rachel exhaled, wrapping her arms around herself. I'm trying not to be. He poured a glass, then paused. She needs something softer, he thought. He grabbed another glass, filling it with a smoother brandy before walking over and offering it to her. Drink. She didn't hesitate before taking it, besides, it was Darren who had given it to her. Her fingers brushed his as she accepted the glass. As the warmth seeped into her skin, they shared a gaze. Then, Rachel took a small sip, the burn sharp but comforting. Darren's eyes steady when he spoke to her. "You don't have to be afraid, Rachel." She gave a weak laugh, shaking her head. "Easy for you to say. You're not the one who's about to be hunted down by Gareth Smithers." His face said nothing. Rachel looked at him, then quickly shook her head, remorseful. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean anything by that. I'm just." "You're right. I'm letting the fear get to me." Darren went to refill his glass. "Remember what I said?" She followed him with her eyes. "As long as you're here, Gareth will never harm me." He poured the glass. "I know exactly what moves he's going to make," he said confidently. "Gareth Smithers is a very predictable man. I've been with him long enough to know that." Rachel's brows creased at that statement, confused. "You've only been with him for a few months." Darren sipped his whiskey. "Well, if only she knew." He told her to take a seat on the couch. She did, and he walked and sat towards her, facilitating a nervous smile. He sipped his whiskey for a moment in silence, and as he did, Rachel glanced to her side to study him. It was confusing to her how much younger he was, and yet she had barely noticed it at all because of how he acted. The steadiness in his voice, the sheer certainty, the way he acted, the money he had. And how did he even get all this money? Was he ever going to tell her? She knew he was a finance guru, but this was a lot to accomplish in 1 month. Because of all these, she knew that the things he was saying, he wasn't just saying it to comfort her. He meant it. For the first time since the encounter, her body relaxed slightly. She took another sip, then sighed, staring at the amber liquid in her glass. "My family would have liked you," she said suddenly. Darren raised a brow. "Your family?" She nodded. "The Teschmachers. I don't know if you know of them." Darren frowned in thought. Is Rachel from a powerful family? And why is she bringing this up like she's suggesting marriage? Not noticing the nervous expression on Darren's face, Rachel continued. Well, my father's side was known for weapons manufacturing. Generations of it. Our name was tied to some of the best arms deals across Europe." Darren's expression remained neutral, but he listened closely. "We were wealthy, powerful, but my mother hated it. She was from a quieter family, one that wanted nothing to do with war or weapons. She fell in love with my father anyway. But she told him, from the start, that if he ever put his business before his family, she would leave." Rachel's voice softened, a bitter edge creeping in. "And he did. Again and again." Darren said nothing, letting her speak. He was obsessed with legacy, with keeping the Teschmacher name dominant. He thought it would make up for everything else. But my mother, she couldn't take it. One day, she left, just like she said she would. Took my younger brother with her." Darren frowned slightly. "And you?" Rachel smiled, but it was sad. "I stayed. I thought maybe if I just tried harder, if I made myself indispensable to him, put my efforts into the family's business, he would cherish me just as he cherished it. You know." Her voice halted. "I was trying to borrow some of the attention he gave, the business, by joining him in it. It was silly and pathetic, I know." Darren's jaw clenched. He didn't think it was either of those at all. He'd seen this before: children who clung desperately to absent parents, hoping, praying, that their sacrifice could be enough to change them. It usually never was. Rachel stared ahead, her voice growing distant. "But of course, it didn't work. He barely noticed me. Never spoke to me except in the confines of the headquarters. I was just another piece of his empire. When I got older, I tried to carve my own path. I went into finance, business, anything that would prove I was worth more than just my last name." She let out a breath. "But then, it all fell apart." Just like this, I was involved in a scandal. One I had no idea of. Darren's eyes narrowed. Someone inside the company was making illegal deals. Terrorists, gangs, cults, enemy nations, you name it. The authorities cracked down hard, and our name was dragged through the mud. Everything we built, gone, just like that. Darren watched her closely, his grip on his glass tightening. My father couldn't handle it. He took what was left of his fortune and disappeared. I never saw him again. Silence settled between them. Rachel exhaled slowly. Gareth knew my father, and well, he offered me the job the moment he saw me. At first I thought he was the nicest man in the world for doing that. But then I found out what his true motives were. Her face fell. I don't think I've ever really felt secure. Never felt like I had solid ground beneath my feet. Her fingers traced the rim of her glass. At least not since leaving my family. She hesitated, tightening her lips before continuing. Except. She bit her lip now, finally looked up at him, her cheeks coloring slightly. Except when I'm with you. A quiet, vulnerable confession. Darren's chest tightened as she slowly leaned in, resting her head against his shoulder. The weight of her, the trust in that small action, sent something stirring deep inside him. When I'm with you, she murmured, I feel the most safe. Like I know nothing is going to happen to me. Because you won't allow it. And you don't even have to say it most of the time. I already know. Darren swallowed, feeling his throat tightening. Is that why you're so keen on helping me start my company? She stared at the flower vase on his table, then quietly answered, yes. Nothing is going to happen to you either. Because I won't allow it? His breath trapped slightly as she continued, voice steady despite the faint tremor in it. I want to make sure that everything is done to perfection. That you'll be satisfied. Darren felt his heartbeat pick up. Was this really the silent witch? He'd never expected her to be so expressive in her emotions. So poetic and sentimental. He looked down at her, the way her lashes fluttered slightly, the faint warmth of her breath against his collarbone. Slowly, he lifted a hand, placing it over her shoulder in a silent gesture of comfort. Of understanding. The room was quiet. Rachel softly said, I don't want to go back to the hotel tonight. Her voice was barely above a whisper, but it cut through the silence like a confession. She pulled back slightly to look up at him, her eyes searching. Can I stay here? Darren didn't answer right away. He just looked at her, his mind weighing the moment, the significance of what she was asking. Yes, he simply replied. Rachel's eyes flickered with relief, trust, admiration, and desire. All the words used to replace and cloak that very powerful L word. She continued to look up at him. And he looked down at her. Before either of them could think, before hesitation could creep in, she stretched her neck, reaching for his face with her lips. And Darren leaned in. Their lips met. The kiss was soft at first, a slow press of warmth and need. Then deeper, as if sealing something between them, something unspoken yet understood. The taste of brandy on her lips, the way her fingers gripped his shirt lightly. Darren felt himself sinking into it, into her. The objects in the living room braced themselves to witness another romantic encounter.